one place, trying to set it up in another place, and it's been somewhat of a nightmare. Imagine trying to move all of your stuff through a normal move and then trying to move all of your equipment too as well, and getting everything set up. So I appreciate you guys being here tonight. Thank you guys so much for being patient with me this week. I know normally I do a show on Friday night, and there's just no way I could have gotten it out Friday night. I just, there was just no way. I didn't even have internet set up at the new place yet. So I kind of had to do in between trying to set things up. And anyway, it's been somewhat of a nightmare. I'm sure no one cares. But one thing about life, I'll say, instead of complaining to you guys, because I know that's not why you're here, life is a funny thing. When life beats you down and they say you're supposed to enjoy life, but, life kind of feels like a boxing ring at times, doesn't it? Doesn't it feel like sometimes life, you're in the ring with Mike Tyson and he's just beating the crap out of you and you just keep getting up and keep getting up. And, but that's what you got to do. Got to keep getting up, got to keep doing it. And, I just want to say I really, really do appreciate you guys being here. Sunday's still up in the air at this point. I'm still trying to set up my studio. The show sounds a little bit different tonight. It's because I kind of have a thing Jimmy rigged up at this point, doing the show. But the good news is I got a great studio that I'm going to be working from. Got a lot of things coming down the pipeline as far as content goes. I put off the Conspiracy Corner shows. I know either people hate them or they love them, and there's really no in between. And I'm working on a Bigfoot-related conspiracy show. I think you guys might be interested in it. Duke will be there, and I plan on having a few special guests come in to talk about some things, so some recent things that happened. So very interesting things coming down the pipeline. Remember, if you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And I got a lot of good things coming. So thank you guys so much again for being patient with me. I was reading through the comments that I posted the other week and about in the process of moving, and I just appreciate all your guys' positive comments. It does mean a lot to me. I actually do go through and read the comments. I know a lot of people think I don't, but I actually do go through and read the comments. So thank you so much to you guys for just bearing with me this week. Let's jump into it tonight. Matt, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah, no problem, Wes.
And if you would, I know you had a couple encounters. If you would kind of start from the beginning, tell us what you were out doing and what you ran into and what you experienced.
Yes, sir. It was around October or November 2012, and me and my girlfriend, we were out mudding or trail riding in the Ocala National Forest. We do that a lot. We live in it's a small town in Florida. I don't know if y'all know where Ocala is, but it's in like the middle of Florida. Anyways, we were out riding, and we came upon like a mud hole, and my girlfriend told me to go around it, but that kind of made me want to go through it even more. So I went through it and got stuck and was buried, couldn't get out. So we sat there for like a couple hours. Nobody came. We didn't have service at the time. So I was out there, and I heard a knocking on a tree, and I thought, it might have been somebody like nailing up a tree stand or something. So I walked towards it, and when I got to it, opened up into like a little clearing with like some saplings and some pine trees and stuff, and there was like a half-dead pine tree, and I seen a dude with a stick hitting on a tree, and originally I thought it was a guy like in camo or a ghillie suit, but he was really big though, so I was like, man, that's a big dude. But then once I got a little closer, I seen it wasn't a dude at all, and I was like, oh man, I didn't know what it was, I almost thought it was like a bear, but then I was like, bear can't hit a tree with a stick, so I got real nervous, and I started to back away real slowly, and then it turned and looked at me, and I can't even describe to you how like what I felt like. It was like, you ever had like a dream and it's like something scares you and you can't move, you know what I'm saying? You try to move, but you can't move, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, like, I don't know if you ever had a dream like that, but you get so scared you couldn't move. So I was kind of stuck there for a minute. But he watched me for a minute, and then he just took off. But the way he took off, it was like a run, but it was almost like a glide. Like he barely, it almost like he didn't even touch the ground with his feet. He just, I don't know, he just moved through the forest like it, like if me or you tried to run through the woods, we have to, jump over stuff and it, clumsily, but he was, graceful with it. So, but, the face on him looked like, have you ever seen like Planet of the Apes, the new one?
Yeah, absolutely.
It kind of looked like a cross between that but it was, more human looking, but the expression is what like scared me the most because the look he was looking at me, it was like he was, I don't know if I want to say contemplating something, like he was weighing his options on what to do, but I didn't really like what he was, I didn't really like what he was looking, so, but luckily he just ran off. He was like the color of him, he was like a brownish, not red, but when the sun would hit him, when he ran off, the sun hit him, so he was kind of reddish, brownish in different parts. Around his chest, he had less hair. His legs, his calves and stuff had less hair. His arms were really long. Like his arms were, and they were like muscular all the way through, but they didn't have much hair either. The face kind of had hair, but not, it was like a shorter hair though. You know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't like a big bushy hair or nothing like that. And the nose was, it protruded a little bit, but you could see like the nostrils almost like a gorilla. You know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't like ours, you can't really see our nostrils. It's like, but his, you could see it. But he ran away, and I went back to the car with my kids and my girlfriend were there. So all I had only at the time was like a little 380. So I went and locked the doors, and they thought I was crazy because I told them, and they're like, they thought I was like joking with them. But then my little kids, they started getting scared. So I was like, no, it'll be okay. But, yeah, I'm kind of getting goosebumps now telling the story. But, yeah, I locked the doors and we stayed in the car. And the battery was dead, too, by that time, too, so it was hot. So we just stayed in that car for like 2 hours until somebody came and towed us out. And I didn't even tell them, people that towed us out. And the second instance was we run dogs for deer. I don't know if y'all even are allowed to do that or not up in Washington, or how you hunt or whatnot up there, but down here we let dogs go, and they run deer, and you can either, they chase them back towards you, and you like go in front of them and stuff like that and wait for the deer to come out. Well, we have GPS collars on our dogs, and we have like 8 dogs out that day. Anyways, my girlfriend, she was in the car, and she was monitored, and she's got like a little like iPad thing that hooks up, and she can track where the dogs and stuff go. And one of our dogs, Bo, he broke off from the pack, and he took a different, like he went, which is odd. He picked up on a different scent or whatever. But what was weird is that you can't really tell exactly how fast they're going. But she called me and she said, Bo's really moving like a distance, like he's. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's going on the GPS map, like, way faster than he should be. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can see, like, them, like, it's like a dot, right? And you can see it going. Well, his dot was going a lot faster than the other dogs. You see what I'm saying? So, all of a sudden, the dot stopped. And it just didn't move no more. So, I got on the four-wheeler. And I went out there, and it turned into a swamp, and I had to stop because it got up to, like, knees. And I found the only thing I found was his collar, and it was all bloody, and there was, like, pieces of skin on it and fur on it. So, but that was the second experience. Third experience, we were out there again in her Nissan Sentra, and it was, what year was that, Ben? Like 2014? It was like 2014, and yeah, and it was, we were out there just riding around, and it was some sugar sand, and we got stuck, and it was like midnight, and I was walking around outside the car, and I heard a whistle, and I thought it was her whistling to me, so I went back, and I asked her, I was like, what's up? And she was like, I didn't whistle. And then we heard off to the right of us, we started hearing like footsteps and stuff, and we both got kind of concerned because this is also after I seen the creature. But there's also there's these rainbow people that live out in the woods, like they're hippies and whatnot, and they can be, you know, crazy sometimes because they're on drugs and whatnot, and they can rob you and stuff like that. So we ended up calling the sheriff's office, and one came out there, and he had a Silverado, but it was just a two-wheel drive. So he hooked up to us, and he tried to tow us out, but he couldn't tow us out because he kept getting stuck too. But when he got out, he also heard the footsteps in the woods, and he started asking us. He was like, you know, did you guys have somebody else with us? Do you have something, you know, that was in the car that shouldn't have been? Do you have a friend out there like hiding something? And we're like, no, it's just us. So anyways, he called a friend or another sheriff that had a four-wheel drive Explorer, and he came out there. And as soon as he got there, they like went over and had a little like conference. They talked to each other for a second, and he went in his truck, and he got his AR-15 out the rack, and he started shining it through the woods and stuff. So he hooked us up, and he pulled us out, but they didn't even unhook the rope until we got all the way to the paved road. So he I'm missing like man, I completely forgot like the good part of the story. When we left, we left with him, we left with the guy in the truck to go meet the guy in the Ford Explorer because we didn't know exactly where we were. Well, I left the shirt I was wearing on top of the car, right? So when we went back to the car, the shirt was gone. The light, my front right tail light, or my front right headlight was busted, and part of the bumper was bent. And they both looked at that too. So they pulled me out, and my headlight was busted. So they escorted me home, and then they wrote me an accident report saying that I hit a deer. They gave it to me, and I was like, but I didn't hit a deer. And they're like, so they're like, just go with that, blah blah blah. And I was like, all right. And they're like, and please, we're not even supposed to tow you out of the woods or anything. So because if we would have hurt your car in any kind of way, we would have got in trouble. So don't tell nobody about it. But yeah, that's about it.
When you say you hit a deer, what did you actually hit?
No, I didn't hit anything. It was from when we left and I came back. Something that took my shirt, busted the headlight, and pulled on the bumper. You see what I'm saying? Like the bumper was bent back. While we were gone, something did that to the vehicle, and the officers seen that, and they wrote up the report that I hit a deer. You get what I'm saying?
I gotcha.
They wanted to, squash the situation, because they were out there and they both witnessed it. So they wrote me that for my insurance claim. So I still have all the pictures of it too. I'll send it to you. I have the picture. It doesn't look like I hit something because the bumper's peeled back. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like the front of it is bent. It's not like I ran into something. But
when you were looking at the creature, tell me about its face.
It was the color of it was like old leather almost, like a grayish leather is what I could explain. And the nose was it was real close to the face. It was real flat. The hair, he had a forehead and stuff. The hair started back around the forehead. The ears were kind of weird. They were it was they were almost closer to, you know what I'm saying? Ours are, his were closer to his head, his eyes, it was, and they were real small too. You couldn't really see them. I remember focusing on that. The ears were real. They were almost like a little mushroom or something, up against the head. The lips, they were, I don't want to say they were pink, but they were not the same color as the face per se. They were a lightish, maybe lightish pink, you could say, but you could tell he looked real weathered. His face looked like you left some leather out in the weather for a long time.
Did you notice any facial expressions?
It just had like he looked at me like he was really deep in thought. Like that's what bothered me the most. Like you could see intelligence. You know, like I think they're a flesh and blood animal, but the look he was looking at me, it wasn't like you looked at a bear or a deer. You know, they just or a dog. You know, they just look like an animal. This thing was looking at me like it was contemplating something. You know what I'm saying? Like it that's what bothered me the most. Like it was thinking about what his next option was going to be, you know?
Did you get the impression, was he kind of looking at you in the way like he was going to attack you, or was it more curiosity, or what was your feeling when he was looking at you?
I really thought he was going to charge me. If I would have had a gun on me or something, I probably would have shot the thing, because it really, like, it bothered me. It was not a happy look at all. It was menacing. You know, the thing looked evil almost is what I could say. Like really, like the thing didn't look like an animal should look. You know, even gorillas and chimpanzees, it just had a evil look to it. You know what I'm saying? Like it just didn't look. I can't even put it into words. You would have to. I mean, you've seen them, and people that seen them know, like, you know, it's different. Like, and it's just like because I originally. You know, I wrote up the BFRO report, and the dude came out and talked to me and stuff, and that really, like, you know, turned me off of really, you know, until I found your show. You know, everybody else is like, you know, they act like it's Harry and the Hendersons, you know, like you hit him with an SUV and took him home and he's eating cheese on his couch, but that's not at all the impression I got from him at all. Like, because he told me, he was like, oh, he's just they don't bother nobody, and they're just a friendly forest giant. But given the different situation, I think the thing, you know, and it's just like, you know, like David Paulides and Mission 411 and stuff. You like aware of Mission 411, those books?
Yeah, no,
So yeah, like I got into that too after this. I had stumbled upon it in YouTube, and like, you know, that all that is, you know, you would have to think it's Bigfoot, you know, taking those people. And it's just like with the down here. They won't let you fly a drone over the forest no more because it disrupts animal activity. But yet you let me run my dogs through the woods and shoot the animals. So yeah. I don't understand what you're saying. You know what I'm saying? Like that. What do you mean? You're worried about the drone bothering the deer, but you let me go out there with my 308 and shoot the deer? So I think, you know. And it's weird because we actually, me and my chick, we went to the local forestry place, and we're like, hey, do you have a list of missing people? And they're like, no, we don't keep up with that. We don't have anything. And they got real like wary too, and they're like, who are you with? And we're like, no, we just, you know, we're just wanting to know, you know, because we've seen some things on TV, and they're like, no, we don't keep up with that. And I'm like, well, you know, why not? You know exactly how many Florida Panthers there are in the state of Florida, but you don't know how many missing people you got in the woods. That doesn't make me feel very safe, you know, going out in the woods with my kids. So, and they had no answer to that. So.
And they can give you a rough estimate how many black bears or bears are in an area. They can give you a rough estimate how many cougars are in the area. But you're right. The minute you bring up missing people, they're like, "Oh, we don't keep track of that. Sorry." And it's complete horse crap, is what it is.
And like because the Freedom of Information Act, you know, you're supposed to be able to send that in on any missing persons, and they're supposed to send it back to you, but. You know, like the ones he does get back is like the cause of death. Almost all of them are exposure. But the people have food in their backpack. It's 80 degrees outside. They got a lighter. You know what I'm saying? They're like a mile off the trail. How did they die from exposure? Did they get a sunburn? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't understand. Like, that's so... You know what I'm saying? That's so crazy that all these people died from, or like, I don't know if you've seen, you're probably familiar with the 411, but like the little kids that it's like my 2-year-old, he's not going to go 8 miles up a mountain across rivers and stuff and they don't have no, like, you know, and some of them, like, their feet aren't even dirty. Like, their shoes aren't even dirty. So what happened there, you know? It's craziness.
I wanted to ask you, when you were looking at this thing, how tall would you say it was?
He wasn't, you know, because I know, like, over y'all's way, y'all say, like, they get up to, like, 10 feet and stuff like that. But he was probably, like, 7, maybe a little over 7. And he had a real big chest, but he wasn't, like, real stocky. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've seen, like, Patty and stuff like that. It was more like a big chimpanzee, per se.
Yeah, and that's pretty common.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it was real muscular. Like, like the thing, you know, it looked like it goes to the woods gym every day and works out, you know. But yeah, it wasn't stocky. It was just real lean and just muscular. But yeah, it was probably 7.5. Because I'm 6 foot, and it was definitely a 1.5 taller than me.
I'm curious off your impression, and there's very few people I've talked to where they've actually said it had a stick in its hand and beating on a tree. I have had those reports. What was your impression of what it was doing?
You know, I've thought about that a lot, and there's several things. I almost thought that it might have been calling me into it, like, or calling other ones, or, like, I think there was a purpose, like, 'cause when it looked at me, it didn't look surprised. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, it looked like it knew I was going to be there. You get what I'm saying? Like, I didn't, you know, me like, when I, you know, made a noise and stuff and he turned around, it was like he already knew I was there anyways, if you get what I'm saying. Like, it's not like I snuck up on him. Like, that's almost the impression I got, is that he seen us and the kids, you know, I had my kids out there and my girlfriend out there, and we was out there for several hours around the truck, just walking around and stuff. I almost feel like he was luring me in. Is it really? That's kind of how I feel with the situation. I don't know. I mean, I just, you know, and then I don't know. It was really, the more I think about it, the more creeped out I get, because he didn't at all seem startled to see me. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too how you described the look on his face, almost like you could kind of tell that he was contemplating, thinking. You know, so many witnesses have had on the show, when they've had those type of encounters, that's one thing they always say. There was a thought process going on. There was wheels turning inside that head. It's not like you run across a bear and it's kind of a blank look, or you run across a cougar or, you know, a deer. Whenever people run across these things, they always say that they could see the wheels turning in the thing's head.
What bothers me is, what if it would have been one of my boys that would have went out there instead of me? Let's say I would have been, you know, too busy trying to get the truck unstuck, and they heard the knocking, and they would have, you know, what would he have done? You know, if it wouldn't have been me, you know what I'm saying? Like, he might have took one of my kids or something. That's kind of how I felt. Like, if it wouldn't have been me, then maybe, I don't know. It just was. I don't know. I've thought about it a lot, you know. And now I don't go camping. You know what I'm saying? I still go hunting, but I don't go out there with, you know, nothing bigger than a 357 or nothing smaller than a 357. Like, I don't, you know, I still go out there, but I have this, you know, I always be feeling like I'm being watched, whether I am or not. Like, it's ruined, you know, my sense of, you know, I still like the woods, but not like I used to. Not at all. Like, it's troublesome, you know, like I don't mind riding through them, but then once I'm out, and then, like, in a tree stand or anything, it still bothers me, because even when I'm in the tree stand, I'm always looking behind me. You know what I'm saying? Like, making sure nothing's sneaking up on me or something. So.
No, I don't blame you. How long ago did this happen?
2012.
Okay, so it's pretty recent.
Yeah.
What did you think you ran into it? Did you know you saw a Bigfoot?
You know, it's weird, right? Because, you know, I've always been, like, you know, because we live in the woods, and my dad and grandpa, they call them boogers, and I've had stories from when I was young, the wood boogers, and, you know, it's always been there, and it's always, you know, I watch the History Channel, and I believed in them, but then when you see it, it's a whole different scenario. You know what I'm saying? It's just because you believe in something, when you know, like, it's like you might look your whole life trying to find something, but then when you find it, you might not have want to found it no more. You see what I'm saying? Like, it really, I don't know. Like, I just to see, it really puts life in a whole different perspective. Like to know that there's something that big and powerful out there. You know what I'm saying? That could just, this thing could just, just rip me apart, like nothing. Like, I have no doubt the thing could just rip my arm off, if it wanted to, And that's like when he was sitting there looking at me, I was like, I'm pretty damn sure I can't outrun the thing. So it's like I just froze, because it was either going to, kill me or not. Running from it's not going to do no good. So I just stood there, and thank God he decided not to mess me up that day. So. And
maybe I missed it in the beginning. So did the creature just walk off?
He like glided off, basically. He like like if you could have seen the way the thing moved through the woods, it was incredible. Like I've never seen anything move like that. Like it was gone. Like it literally, because where I was at, I could see for a pretty good distance, like trees and stuff. And it covered 200-300 yards, and I don't even. It was just gone. Like I watched it for a second, but it was. And it was graceful though, but I don't know. Like it was, you would have to see it to understand what I'm saying. Like it wasn't like me or you just running through the woods. This thing, it was like its feet barely touched the ground almost.
How would you describe the jaw features, like the nose and the jaw features? You'd mentioned you thought it really didn't look like an ape, and it really didn't look like a man. How would you describe the jaw, the nose, the overall face? I know you'd mentioned that the movie's a great way to, you're talking about Caesar, right, in Planet of the Apes?
Yeah, but Caesar, but more kind of like the other one, Koba, the mean-looking one, the one that had, like, scar on his face, like the bad one.
Right.
He's more like him, you know what I'm saying, but not, like the thing looked evil, you know what I'm saying, like the thing was not friendly looking in any kind of way, but, and his lips and stuff, they were like real low, like on his face, kind of like it was more down, like it wasn't right in the middle of his face. It was like a lower, and they were big too. He had a big old mouth, like a big, you know what I'm saying? He didn't open it or anything, but you could tell if he would have opened it, like he had, his lips were probably, 5 inches maybe, if you measured them, And he had a big, like a jaw, too. You could see his jaw was like a strong, sturdy jaw, you know what I'm saying? And like the whole thing was rock solid. Like the thing was, if you shot one, you might need like a 45-70 rifle or something to take one down for real. Like I had like a little 380 auto in the car, and I don't think that thing would did anything to it. Really, just pissed it off probably. So.
I was just talking to a gentleman earlier. He has a famous case of where there was 2 of them, and he shot one in a tree. And
went up the rock ledge or whatever.
Yeah, went up the rock ledge, and him and I talked for a couple hours today. And I was trying to convince him to come on the show and retell it because there's so much to that story. But
yeah, I heard the story. What did he shoot it with? Did he tell you? Like what kind of caliber?
I can't remember.
30-06?
I want to say it was like a 300, but I could be wrong. I'd have to go back and look at my notes. And he said he hit it and it dropped. Yeah. He hit it dead square in the chest and it dropped. Yeah. But one thing I thought was interesting, he said the face of it reminded him of the Joker because the mouth was so wide and the jaw was so big. Like the Joker with its makeup.
Yeah.
That's how big its mouth was.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. The lips on it. You could tell, like, if it would have opened its mouth, it would have had a big old mouth on him. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, that is a good description. The Joker with the makeup on, how the lips are lower on the jaw. That's what it looks like.
Did you smell anything, or was there anything else in the encounter that kind of stuck out?
I didn't smell anything. It wasn't like windy or anything that day, and I was in such awe. I wasn't really paying attention to any kind of smell. Everything went silent for a minute, almost like when you shoot a gun and everything's just, you can't hear anything. You can't. It was like I was stuck. Like like my legs were heavy, and I couldn't have ran if I wanted to. Like I just felt real heavy. Like I was just. It was like like when you almost get into like an automobile accident or something, and then that second afterwards, you're just in shock and awe. It was kind of like that.
No, I hear you on that. And he's, it's interesting. What color was the creature?
It was like a brownish, but when the sun hit him, it was like almost a golden reddish. You know, I don't want to say red because he wasn't red, but he wasn't brown either. You know, it was like almost like a grizzly bear color kind of. You know, like any kind of, and a little bit of like in his chest area and stuff, like a little bit of gray, like the shorter hair. Like his chest and legs, they were like a grayish, like a, you know, not gray per se, but it was a grayish color. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But and he was patchy, kind of like you could tell he, you know, been living in the woods his whole life. Like I could tell, like I'd seen like around his legs and stuff, especially he was like kind of patchy. Like he was not like he had the mange or nothing, but he was, you know, he didn't go to the groomers too much, you know.
What do you think these creatures are, in your own personal opinion? And again, there's no wrong answer. I'm not going to beat you up for whatever you say. I'm just curious on your impression of what you think these creatures are.
I think it's a flesh and blood primate, but like a very intelligent primate, obviously, you know, to be out there for so long, you know, basically, you know, undiscovered, you know, per se. But yeah, I think it's flesh and blood. I don't get into the realm of supernatural and all that, you know. What do you call them? Flute players or something like that? What do you call the people?
Yeah.
But flute player, you know, I don't think they're supernatural or nothing like that. I think they're very intelligent, you know. But then again, you know, let's say if me and you decided to get some camo or get like a ghillie suit, and me and you go out in the Ocala National Forest and, you know, don't want to be found, it's going to be pretty hard to find us, you know. Because it's all, you know, once you and they live there, you know what I'm saying? They live there their whole lives. So it's like it's just like with the Finding Bigfoot show, you know what I'm saying? You got these 4 people coming out there, and they got like a helicopter overhead recording stuff, and they got a big old camera crew, and they don't even go that far back there anyways. Like, how are you going to find something that don't want to be found, obviously, and you're out there trotting around doing nothing, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I really don't see how the show's still going on, because they don't even find bears or nothing. Like, they don't even find wildlife, let alone Bigfoot, you know? I didn't watch the show you know, especially when it first came on, I was like, okay. I haven't seen anything on that show. They don't even find like a squirrel, let alone Bigfoot, you know? So,
right.
I don't know. But, well, I don't know. I'm sorry if they're like, I don't know if you know the people, so if they're like your friends.
No. You're not offending me.
I'm sorry, I don't mean
No.
I don't mean.
You're not offending me at all. You're not offending me at all. I was kind of curious, you know, with regard to this whole encounter, how did it change you seeing this thing? I mean, I know you had mentioned you grew up talking to your dad. He talked about boogers, but actually seeing this, how did it affect you afterwards?
I'm real skittish about being in the woods, especially with my kids and stuff. It's camping and stuff is out of the question. I'm not going to go, you know, my only defense is a tent. No, I'm not doing that. Not no more. Like, I just, you know, and it makes it really even, I just always feel like I'm being watched, and it's really, I wouldn't say it's ruined because I still go hunting and stuff, but I mean, we bring a lot of dogs and trucks, and I usually go with a lot of people, but going out there by myself, no, I don't do that no more. I always have somebody with me. I always take I take like a sidearm, and I take the 30-06 with me, or I got a 45-70 rifle that I go. So I don't go out there with just no bird shot and nothing, shooting squirrels no more. I won't do that. And I used to bow hunt too. I don't do that no more. So I mean, it's kind of hard to really enjoy hunting because I'm always thinking something's hunting me, really. So
yeah. Did you talk to anyone about your encounter after this happened?
You know, I've told my girlfriend, and, you know, she believes me and stuff, but, you know, I've tried to talk to, you know, some people. My dad believes me, you know, and, like my uncles and stuff, they believe me, but as far as friends and stuff, I don't, you know, a couple of people shot me down real quick and laughed about it, and that really, you know, that makes me kind of real mad, you know, because you don't, you know, if you would have been there, you'd have probably passed out, you know, and, like, had to change your underwear or something. So, I mean, you just don't even understand. Like you have no concept, even seeing pictures and seeing, Pat, cause, I think that the Patty film's real and stuff, but until you see it face to face, you have no idea. Like you have no idea the feeling you're going to feel when you see one. Like it changes your whole perspective of life in general, or what you think is out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Matt, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing the experience. It's quite the experience, and terrifying and exciting all wrapped in one, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Thank you for having me on the show, Wes.
Thanks, Matt. Next up on the show, I want to welcome Joseph. Joseph, thanks for coming on, man. I really do appreciate you being here tonight, man.
No problem, Wes.
And if you would, kind of start from the beginning. Tell us about your encounter. Kind of walk us into what was going on at the time, what were you doing, and then if you would, for the audience, just walk them right into the encounter.
All right. Well, it was about 20 years ago. I was in Boy Scouts, and I've been, I guess, elected by my troop to join the Order of the Arrow. And that requires you to go out for a 3-day camping weekend, do a service where you're, some kind of task, and you have to have an overnight camp that's primitive camping. Just literally sleeping bag, that's it. No shelter, no fire, nothing. And during all this, you have to be absolutely quiet. You're not allowed to speak at all. So that day we had done our, task, working around this summer camp that was shutting down. It was in the fall, beginning of fall, and it was actually in Tennessee where this happened at. It was time for us to go out for the night camping. So we got marched up this hill, and the leaders that was with us were like, okay, you sleep here. And they walk, 20, 30 yards. Next kid, all right, you sleep here. So we laid down, I got my spot, and I got some pine straw scooped up, made a bed, laid down for the night. Now there were 2 trees that were within 10, 15 feet of where I was at. One of them was standing straight up, a pine tree, and the other one was like a pine sapling that had like bowed over. And that night, I went to bed, I went to sleep, and at the time I had bad night terrors, and I would talk in my sleep and kick and everything. And I guess I was doing that all night long. I had a guy tell me the next day, he heard me talking in my sleep, and I would moan and stuff, and it was just, anyway, it was a clear night. I want to say the moon was about halfway, but it's one of those nights, where the stars were so bright, it just lit up the entire woods. You didn't need a flashlight to see around you. So I'm laying there, and it had just dozed off when I felt this rush of wind on me. I heard this whoosh, and I looked up, and an owl had perched on the sapling tree that was laying over, and it was staring right at me. I was like, okay, well, that is a big owl. And that was scared me a little bit. Then laying there, and it looked to its left, which was my right, and just all of a sudden took off. I was like, okay. And, so I looked in the direction. I was like, what, why did this thing take off? And I looked over there, and there was something peeking from behind the trees. And I could just see it, lean out a little bit. It was just it would let one eye look around. I was like, what is this? Am I seeing this? Stayed still for a few minutes, and it would look out, look at me, lean back in. And it did that about 3 or 4 times. I started getting, fearful. So I was like, all right, well, do I want to scream out? Because something's wrong. This thing is, good 7.5 feet tall.
What did you think it was?
I had no idea what it was. I had seen the Patterson Gimlet film before, and I had heard of Bigfoot, but I never, it was one of those things that was like an urban legend. It's a mythological beast. You don't think you're actually going to see anything. And being out there in the woods, I'm thinking, all right, bear, cougar, what could be staring at me? What does this? Well, I've seen bear, I've seen mountain lions and seen cougars, none of them do this. None of them are that tall. And he just kept staring at me. So I started scooting back a little bit. I was like, well, do I scream, and, try to scare it? I don't know what to do. So I just kind of froze. Well, that's when it stepped out, and I saw it. And I don't know what else to say except, it was the Bigfoot, basically that you see on the Patterson Gimlet film. It was standing there, I think about 15 feet away from me. I'm like, okay. I'm starting to get, I'm basically frozen now. I'm scared, because I'm like, well, what should you do? This isn't covered in the Boy Scout manual. We meet this wildlife.
Right.
So,
yeah. So what happened next? You're laying there, you're looking at this thing,
yeah.
and it's peeking out, looking at you. Man, that's tough being out there, no tent, no nothing,
yeah.
Just kind of roughing it. What happens next?
All right. Well, it stepped out, and it's a full view of the tree. Full view of me, sorry, and it squats down. And Wes, it just sat straight down. It didn't, how when we go from standing to sitting, we have to, even when we squat all the way down, to sit, we put our hands on the ground. Didn't have to do any of that. It looked like Spider-Man in his crouch position when he went straight down, and he just sat around his butt. And I could tell it was a female. I didn't see any male genitalia, but there was like a little bit of breast to it, and it just sat there for a few minutes, just staring back at me. Now, when this happened, I didn't feel threatened by it. The fear started to leave me, and I was just sitting there watching it, and it was watching me, and it just sat there for it seemed like forever. Probably couldn't have been more than 5 minutes. It got up and walked away, silent. There was not any, leaves crackling or anything.
Were you able to get a good look at the face of the thing?
Oh, yes. Very good look.
How would you describe the face?
Very ape-like. Had the quintessential, smushed nose. The conical head, the trap muscles and the neck. It has a neck, but it's just got huge trap muscles, there. It makes it look like it doesn't have one. But has, I don't want to say human eyes, but very emotional eyes, if you understand what I'm trying to say there.
Yeah. No, I understand, yeah. Or there was thought behind the eyes.
Yeah, you could tell it was trying to figure out, what's going on. What is this thing laying here? And, I guess it finally figured me out. That was, a young human laying here on the ground, and it just got up and walked away now.
And what did you do next? So it gets up and it walks off. What did you do next?
I continued to lay there, and I was just kind of like, did that just happen? And pretty much the rest of the night I was wide awake. I just waited for dawn. Could not get there soon enough. I was never so happy to see the sun. But what's crazy about it is, like I said, I never felt threatened by it. It's like it was a curiosity thing. And like I wrote you, I think it just heard me struggling and probably talking in my sleep, and was just peeking in on me when that owl woke me up. And now it's like, okay, what do I do now?
It is an interesting encounter because it just kind of came at you. Said you thought it was female. You saw breasts.
Yeah, I saw breasts, but they were like pancake, and it was a young looking one. The impression I've gotten when I think back about it was, it was probably a young female and had just weaned off a young one, and still was having what they call that postpartum. Still had a lot of its maternal instincts.
Right. Yeah. No, I understand what you mean.
It came to check on me. So,
how was the creature proportioned? When you say it squatted down, did it kind of just sit down on its haunches? And did you notice how it was proportioned, or was there anything that really stood out when you looked at it?
I was just more or less overwhelmed, just by how tall this thing is, because there's no animal that tall on this continent except for that, The arms were down by its side, and they were coming probably about mid-thigh, I want to say. I'm not quite sure about, remembering small details like that 20 years later is a little hard.
I understand that completely. You know, it's odd when you run into these things. You know, it's kind of a shame. It's such a joke out there in the, you know, regular world that these things are, people make jokes about it, but people run into these things, you know, like you ran into it. What I think is interesting about your encounter, most of the time when I have people on the show, generally it's not a happy encounter. It's usually a very aggressive encounter. People come across them. They, you know, people and these things cross paths. I don't buy into the forest people thing. I don't think these things are people. I think they're probably, you know, close to us in the family tree, kind of like the same way a gorilla and a chimp are. Most people don't realize a gorilla and a chimp are very close to us in the family tree, very close.
Exactly. I mean, a human chimp separated by, what, 3%
Right.
DNA difference?
Right.
I mean, how much closer can we be,
and,
you know?
You know, it's like I was seeing like Coco the gorilla signing about how poachers had killed her mother. I was just amazed. If you ever get a chance, check that out. It's very, very...
Oh, yeah. I've read up on Coco. I mean, she's, you know, it's an amazing creature.
Yeah, and I think that's how these things are, and I think you can run into some... I hate to say it, generally speaking, when you get the really aggressive type encounters, you get the bluff charge, you get the stuff thrown at you. It generally seems to be with the males with these things. The females seem to be, for the most part, cool when you're out there. They generally don't.
As long as they don't have their children around, you know.
Yeah, as long as they don't have the, you know, but in her situation, you know, you'd mentioned night terrors. She probably, you know, this creature probably heard you going off while you were sleeping, decided to come in, check things out, see what was going on. You know, there was really no aggression, which I'm glad there wasn't. You know, you being a young kid too, yeah, you know, it probably realized that you really weren't a threat in the grand scheme of things. How did this change your life from seeing this thing?
Well, I mean, I'm still an active outdoorsman. I'm constantly out doing stuff in the woods and everything. And I actually, you know, it's made me, I feel very peaceful when I'm in the woods just because of her, you know. Well, I say her, you know, I like to think positive of it. But I've always been comfortable in the woods. I never let it stop me. And I've heard like limb snapping, and you know, all throughout my life in the woods and stuff. I mean, and I would hear something and I'd just smile, you know. I'd like to think it was her, you know.
Well, be careful though.
And I would just
I always tell people, be careful because you.
Oh yeah, I'll walk away when I hear limb snapping.
You never know the one you're going to run into. There was a gentleman I had on the show, and he had a relatively peaceful encounter. I mean, really, there was really no issues with it. And he would get, you know, he constantly would go back out and try and find the same one. And I would tell him, man, you know, if you may not run into the same one, you may have a completely opposite encounter than what you did the first time. You just never know what you're going to run into. Just because you ran into one that was somewhat peaceful, came in, checked things out, doesn't mean next time around you're going to have that same encounter. So, you know, that would be my only warning to you, my only advice to you. Have you told anyone about your encounter?
You are the first I've ever told.
I appreciate that, man.
I've never, and I decided that it was finally time for me to tell what happened to me, because I constantly listen to your podcast. It completes my Sunday when my phone says, "Hey, you got a new Sasquatch Chronicles." So I'm always listening. But lately it seems like I've heard more, you know, well, I'd say negative stories being told about them. And I was like, you know, my experience was different, and these people need to hear both sides of the fence on this, you know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So,
and I agree with you on that. I was just talking to a guy, and I posted it to the blog earlier this week. He actually shot one. He shot a female in a tree. He shot the female in the tree because there was another male that popped up right next to her. And when he shot it, it fell out of the tree. The male picked it up, and then he told me, he goes, "Wes, it climbed a sheer rock wall. There's no way any human could ever climb this."
Oh, I can see how they can do it.
Yeah, with this other creature on its back. And, you know, his encounter, I wouldn't really say it was an aggressive encounter, but, you know, it was a reaction. It was an emotional reaction. He was in fear of his life, and he took the shot. And I can't say that I wouldn't do things differently. I probably would have done the same thing. You know, when you have emotions, you make bad decisions sometimes. But I'm really glad that your encounter was a semi.
Now, I want listeners to understand, these are animals, but they are highly intelligent like human beings. there is a difference there.
I would agree with you on that.
You know, and like you said, just because mine was, yeah, you know, and just like that scenario, you know, he picks, I guess it was his mate, you know, picks her up and hauls her off real quick, just like, you know, one of us would have done.
And, you know, like in your encounter, too, I mean, they are highly intelligent. You know, if that creature wanted to kill you, it would have been a split second.
Nothing. It would have been nothing for her to reach out and grab my leg, and my leg stretched out. I probably wasn't more than 8 feet away from where she was crouched down at. And it would have been nothing for her just to reach out, lean right over, grab my ankle, and whoop, I'm done.
Yeah.
And she wanted it, you know.
And that's the thing I try and tell people, you know. We are predators. Believe it or not, we are the biggest, baddest predator out there. I know Sasquatch is a very large creature. It's a very intimidating creature. A grizzly bear is a very large creature. It's a very intimidating creature. But at the end of the day, we are the top predators. And I think with these things, sometimes they realize they see another predator. You know, it's hard to say. With your situation, I think that just being a young kid, it was just coming in and checking on you. There was a time where I was out at the Browns and I played a baby crying. And you could hear what sounded like a freight train coming through the forest right for that baby crying sound. And then it stopped just inside the tree line and almost like cooing. That's the only way I can describe it. It's the only thing that's thrown me off because I always thought these things were monsters because of my encounter. I always assumed that these things were just flat out monsters. And that when I played that baby crying at the Browns and I heard that thing coming like a freight train through the forest, believe me, I had my hand on my gun because I thought for sure it was gonna, you know, I was thinking, this is easy meal, this is easy food, you know, it's coming to finish the kill. And then what threw me off is when it stopped inside the tree line and started cooing. Mm-hmm. And that's the only way I can describe it, like it was cooing. Like a mother would coo to her child, or like, you know, and that made me really stop. And I think that was the point where it made me really stop and think, maybe there's more to these things than what I thought. You know, because if you would have asked me 6 months after my encounter, Joseph, I'd have told you, kill them all, let God sort it out. Shoot every one of them. But, you know, you hear encounters like yours or other encounters to where there's really no aggression.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's almost like it was coming in, checking you out, making sure everything was okay. I mean, that's my impression from hearing your encounter. You know, if it would have been a grizzly bear, you'd have been dead. If it would have been a cougar, you would have been dead. It wouldn't have played around. It's not going to come in and check you out, make sure everything's A-okay, then leave. But with these things, you know, there's something different about them, and I think it really depends. We talk a lot about types and the types of creatures you run into. And I think with these things, you know, especially sometimes with the females, I don't know that they're so apt to be aggressive or really want to engage in a fight or want to engage in a... I'm sure if you pushed them, it would happen.
Well, I really believe that these things is a primate, a very highly intelligent, probably almost as intelligent as we are, in the fact that it is a problem solver. You know, it can probably make tools. You know, I'm thinking it's more like a prehistoric man. You know, and I think it realizes, you know, hey, for every one of us that's around, there's probably about 10,000 humans, and so we're outnumbered. And plus, it has these good outlooks over like where the cities have popped up in the mountains and everything. And it's like, ooh, that's a lot of people. All right, I tell you what, we're going to stay in the woods and not go mess with these people. So I think it understands that, and every encounter is just that is reported is just, you know, we happen to cross paths, you know.
Sometimes.
Where I was,
there has been encounters I've had on the show. I would agree with you. Most of the time, that's what happens. There has been encounters I've had on the show where they are preying on people. There is a situation.
Oh yeah, I remember. I just listened to one the other day. It was a Border Patrol gentleman talking about one came up and was stalking these two agents walking.
Right.
So
yeah, so it does happen sometimes. But you know, I'm glad your encounter wasn't a violent encounter, especially being a young man. You know, in that situation, you really are at the mercy of what you come across, especially a Sasquatch. You're really at their mercy. Like I said, if it wanted to kill you, it would have done it. and it would have done it within a split second, and there would have been nothing left of you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if it wanted to, like I said, it could just reach out, grab me, and snap my neck, and that would have been it.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that's what it want to do, especially when it gets down into that position, that crouched position.
I think it just realized I'm a young child, or was a young child, and it was like, oh, it's a baby human. You know?
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, I think getting down in that crouched position, it's kind of like my nephew. I love the kid to death, and, when I talk to him or when I interact with him, I kind of crouch down. I kind of get to his level. That's kind of what I picture.
It puts him at ease,
Yeah, it puts him at ease. If it really wanted to mess with you, it would have just walked right into camp. And, with the size of these things, how big do you think it was? How tall do you think it was?
It was 7.5 feet. I know because the tree it was hiding behind and leaning out and peeking at me, there was a limb, and I had to measure it the next day. But I measured it, and it was, I want to say 7'8", and it barely cleared walking underneath that limb when it stepped out.
Oh, wow. So
I will firmly say 7'5", probably around, I want to say maybe 650, 700 pounds, but very, very lean. I mean, this thing was like a long-distance runner, just nothing but muscle.
And what state did this happen in, Joseph?
Tennessee.
Tennessee, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they are. And it's so hard to judge the weight of these things. You look at something like this, and it's so hard to judge the weight because of the muscle mass.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like they're fat slobs out there running around. These things are built for, I hate to say killing machines, but they really are built like killing machines.
Built for their environment,
Yeah, it's their environment. And I say that. I don't want people to get upset when I say that. It's like a gorilla. A gorilla really is built to be a killing machine. I mean, it's got the strength of 10 men. It'll rip you apart in 2 seconds, and there's really nothing you can do about it. And that's how these things are. And to be honest with you, I'm honored that you would share it with me. I'm like the first person you told. I'm honored by that, man. That means the world to me, very much so. I know how hard it is to come forward and say, hey, I saw this. And the general public really thinks it's nothing more than just folklore or, storytelling or this or that. But at the end of the day, these things are real. People run into them all the time. And what people hear on the show is a very, very, it's like not even 0.5% of the people that have actually ran into them. And so thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you so much for sharing. And again, I'm honored that you would share it with me.
You're more than welcome, Wes. And thank you for having the medium available that, we feel comfortable enough that we could speak out, Like if I hadn't been introduced to your show, I'd be another 20 years before I'd even think about saying anything. If I even did, I'd probably take it to my grave and, it would never been told to anybody.
Well, thank you, brother.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Joseph. And remember, if you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Until next time, everyone, I'll be returning maybe even earlier than midweek. But I should have everything set up. I know Duke and I are working on some things, and I have some other guests that I'm working on. So it should be a great week coming up. Thank you again for bearing with me. Again, Sunday may be a repeat. I'm not sure at this point. Through the move, I don't even really know where half of my clean clothes are at. But that's neither here nor there. I will see you guys next week. Thanks so much for listening. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. Gosh, what a night. I'll be talking with Duke and also Steven. Steven was on a recent expedition with the Big Thicket guys, and I intentionally chose not to have the Big Thicket guys on this episode. I really wanted you guys to hear it from a third party as far as what's going on out there and what happened on that last expedition. I know when I had Thomas Steenberg on the show, he had made a comment about how he didn't think the government cared enough about Sasquatch. He didn't think that they were covering this up. And I took a lot of heat for not drilling him on that. But, the show isn't... I guess it's hard to say. I don't want to invite someone to the show and then argue with them the whole time. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you're inviting someone to dinner and then you berate them the whole time, or you disagree with them the whole time. So, and everyone's free to their opinions. And so when I have someone on the show and they make a comment like that, I know there is a cover-up going on, but, some people don't feel that way, and that's okay. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com, and I appreciate you guys bearing with me over this last week. I finally got moved in. Everything's still kind of a mess, and the only thing really set up at this point is my studio. But everything else, I'm still trying to get organized, and I'm hoping to be organized here in the next couple days. Gosh, it's a pain moving. I don't know if you guys have ever moved. It really is a pain moving. But that's neither here nor there. Regarding the show tonight, like I said, this is one of the expedition members that was there. And a lot of you guys, I know you guys have been talking about it in the forums, and I've been watching the forums, and so I've been kind of wanting to do a show on this. And so really pay close attention. Keep in mind these people are looking for Bigfoot. And I'll let Steven tell the full version, but the short version of the story is the feds had busted these guys for operating a business in the national forest without a permit. And I looked at all their tickets, I actually looked up the fines, and it's about $150. So keep that in mind as you listen to what actually happened on that trip. Let's jump into it tonight. Well, I want to welcome Duke to the show. Duke, thanks for coming on tonight, man.
Always a fun time. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and I know I got Steven as well on the phone. Steven, how are you?
How you doing, Wes? How you doing, Duke?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Duke sounds real. Duke sounds happy to be alive.
Yeah, he sounds his usual jovial self.
Yeah, and I'm really happy that both you guys are here. I wanted to talk a little bit about cover-up, and I know the recent expeditions down in Texas kind of got shut down, and I can throw my 2 cents in. The reason why I thought of doing a show like this, and I was telling Duke this earlier today, is when I had Thomas Steenberg on the show. I know he bent a lot of people out of shape with his comment that he didn't think the government was covering up Sasquatch, and I guess it didn't really bother me that too much because everyone's entitled to their own opinion. If you don't mind, Stephen, kind of start from the beginning. Tell us about the recent expedition that you went on, and just kind of tell us what happened.
Okay, all righty. First things first, I want to get this out on the record. I feel this is important to say. I am only speaking for myself. I am not speaking, nor am I representing in any way, shape, or form any of the guys down there, Bob Garrett, Tim Sermons, Waylon, any of them. That being said, what I'm about to tell you guys was my own personal observations and experiences of what happened. Okay? First things first. I arrived down there actually the day before on Thursday, the 28th of April. Got there in the evening, stayed overnight, tried to kind of check the place out, get an idea for the terrain and everything else. Met up with everyone on about 11 o'clock that following day, Friday morning, the 29th. There were about, I want to say 8 people, 8 participants, plus the big thicket guys, because I think we all rounded out to an even 13. All of the participants met up with Mo. Then we drove out for about maybe a 30-minute drive, 45-minute drive from where we had met till we got out to the hunter's camp that we were at. The area was about maybe 2 acres cleared in the middle of the forest. Actually a pretty deep, for that area, fairly remote location. The forest is broken up a lot and everything. Anyway, we had not been there maybe half an hour, 20 minutes to half an hour. We had parked our cars, we'd gotten out, introduced everybody, shook hands and everything else. And none of us knew anything of what was really going on at the time. We had heard that, these guys get messed with by the law enforcement and the government agents, things like that, but we had no idea what was happening. Mo and
Waylon and them, pretty much just, they were sitting there saying, yeah, well, don't be surprised if someone shows up, blah, blah, blah. They mentioned a specific cop, by name. And I was like, oh, well, you guys know this guy, huh? And they're like, yeah, we've talked to him before. And they're like, he might stop by and check on us, and just see what's up. They're like, it's no big deal. Don't worry about it or anything. It's normal. That was within, 15 minutes of the hello, how are you? Where do we set up our tents type? Probably 30 minutes after we had arrived, we were unpacking our tents and everything else, and here comes up the first SUV. They come up, I think it was a Tahoe, standard law enforcement looking vehicle. It was Department of Interior. Anyway, they pulled up, they start talking. We're spread out all over the 2 acres. The big thicket guys and everyone else, they're intelligent. They're out there camping pretty much in the dead center middle of the clearing. Us newbies who hadn't been in the situation or in the area before, we're out camping near the very edge. And so anyway, the cops are up there talking to big thicket guys for a little while, and then all of a sudden they come down and they're talking to us, and it's just hey, how are you? What y'all doing? Why are you here? Things like that. It's just kind of odd. At first, it just seemed like the normal thing that like park rangers might do to you when they come in and check on you on the camping and everything else. Having been talked about it a little bit and knowing that these guys might have showed up, I said, they asked me, hey, what are we doing? And, I was like, well, we're out here camping for the weekend. No big deal, nothing like that. And after about 5-10 minutes of just chatting with this actually, it was two officers. One, and they were doing good cop, bad cop routine, because one was doing all the talking, one was sitting back just being silent. She was a female. They got in their vehicle and they left. And we're like, well, that was interesting. About 15 minutes after they departed, we had just finished getting our tents up and everything else. We look up, and here comes a line of about 6 to 8. I don't remember the exact amount. I know there's a minimum of 6. I want to say there was 8 SUVs, all coming right down the road, pulling right into the camp area. And they surround the whole camp. I mean, it's like a drug raid. They get everyone out. They start flagging everyone down. I mean, it wasn't violent. It wasn't nerve-wracking necessarily, other than the fact that it was this obvious show of force. But, they're flagging everyone over, bringing, come on up here. We want to talk to you, that kind of a thing. First thing they do is tell us to all be calm. They disarm everyone who's carrying a weapon. They check permits, things like that. And then they proceed to separate us. And they separate us out into a couple of groups, and they keep us there for about 10, 15 minutes. The primary agent who was not the person we spoke to first, who had been in the camp before, this one particular singled out Bob. He demanded, to know where Bob was at that point, right when they come in. I remember hearing that. And, people told him, well, Bob's up in his trailer and everything else. And so he went off and he locked himself in the trailer. The other guys kind of just stood there for a minute. They were mulling around while they had us separated. And then they congregated us back together, and they proceeded to question us. Now, I'm not going to go into what the questions were. These guys, I think, still have ongoing legal issues. So I'm not going to say what questions were being asked. I will say they seemed like ridiculous questions. They were petty. They did not seem to make sense at the time for what was actually going on. We all lined up. We were asked. We gave them our answers, and they let us go. And for the next 2 hours after that, we were just standing there, isolated from each other, and they would hit people individually. They'd go up. And they go and ask them, pull them aside and ask questions. They, pull someone else aside and ask them questions. Near the beginning of this, right after they pulled up and they had isolated Bob, I remember being not far from Waylon, I'd say about 15, 20 feet. And one of the cops was asking him, hey, I know you were out here the other day, getting your webcams. How's your webcams going? And my understanding was, what I understood from the conversation, Waylon looked at him and just was angry because he was like, so you're the problem. You're what happened. And come to find out later, their game cams had been messed with. I think they were missing, actually, is what it was. Also, another thing the cops were doing while we were standing around, and when I say isolated, we were like 2 or 3 individuals. There was me and 2 other guys in one group. Then about maybe 15 feet away, there was a married couple there, and one other guy, he was in another group. I mean, we were all spaced out maybe 15, 20 feet from each other. Okay, we're not like being actively isolated.
Were these people
anyway
in uniform? Did they?
Oh no, they're uniformed. These are all but the senior investigator were uniformed law enforcement officials. Okay. Now we're talking for down here, and I'm assuming this is true about most of the country and everything else. Standard quasi-military uniforms. I mean, they had their combat boots, they had their tack pants. They did not have any chest rigs or vests or anything, but you could tell they had their body armor underneath their shirt. Okay, but so I mean, really, in all honesty, they looked like mostly normal cops. Okay, at least rural cops. City cops may not necessarily look like this, but anyone who lives rural, they're going to recognize what I'm talking about. They weren't heavily armed. There were no rifles or anything like that. Everybody just had a sidearm. All the sidearms stayed holstered. They didn't do anything like that, like in that kind of a show of force. Their show of force was more the quiet intimidation, just stand here for 30 minutes and don't say anything. That kind of a thing. And they kept this up for about 2 or 3 hours. During this time, they'd start asking questions and making statements, and it became obvious they had been listening to us before they came to the camp. We had been under surveillance. They were repeating conversations that we had right before, 10, 15 minutes before they pulled up, right after we got out of the vehicles. They were repeating conversations and facts and things like that the Big Thicket guys said they had 2, 3, 4 days prior. I remember they were saying I remember everyone after everybody left, all the cops left. The Big Thicket guys were sitting there saying, they were talking about that conversation last Wednesday at Bob's house, that kind of a thing. Anyway, they kept us going for about 3 hours like this, just isolated and everything else. I noticed after about an hour or so, I was sitting there and everyone's getting bored and antsy. We got weather. It looks like it was starting to come blowing in. I'm bored. I pick up my phone and I open up my weather app just to see what the weather's going to be. And probably doesn't mean anything. And that's coming from a computer guy here. But I still thought it was interesting and amusing. Pull up the phone and the Wi-Fi pops up detecting a Wi-Fi immediately from one of the vehicles, I'm assuming. But I love the Wi-Fi because it says FBI van. It just says it right there, and I just looked at it at this point, and I remember looking over at the cop next to me, and I said it out loud. No one else had noticed this yet. I just said it out loud. I looked at him and I said, really, you guys, come on now, FBI van? You guys aren't even FBI. I'm just sitting there. I mean, this is it's gotten already to a point of almost ridiculous because, we're out here in the woods camping. I mean, what we're out here looking for signs of Bigfoot, and here we are with 6 or 8 vehicles and 10 or 12 cops. Everyone's isolated. Their whole afternoon's just ruined, and they're making it quite obvious that they've been looking at this for a while. Okay. This continues on after about maybe I'd say 2.5 hours, and I can't be precise on the time because I wasn't actively watching the watch or the clock or whatever from when this began to when this ended. But I'd say it's about 2.5 hours afterwards. They finally, the lead agent leaves Bob's van, then he starts pulling Mo and then Waylon, and then one of the other gentlemen, I can't remember his name now, but one of the other members of Big Thicket that were actually present in there, they start isolating them off in the vehicles, and they start interviewing them. When this whole thing is done, they gather everybody up into this big kind of a circle thing, and they proceed to tell us that, you know, they are sorry they have, you know, ruined their afternoon, but they are actively investigating a possible crime. And the Big Thicket guys are required to leave the forest immediately. They had to pack up. They had to go. They could not stay. You people from out of town, you're fine. Y'all can stay here. Y'all can do whatever you want. But the Big Thicket guys, the guys who came out to see you, you know, to meet and everything else, they have to leave immediately. They're not supposed to be talking with you. They're not supposed to show you guys anything. They can't do anything for you. They got to leave. We started kind of honestly grumping about that one a little bit. You know, we're complaining, saying, you know, come on now, you know, because I was one of two. It was me and then a married couple who were from Austin. We were the only ones who were even local to the state that actually had our own vehicles. Everybody else had flown in and rented cars and things like that. And they really obviously didn't know what the heck to do or what they were, you know, what they were going to do or anything. And so the cops decided, they said, okay, we'll let one of them stay. We'll let Mo stay. But Mo has to leave first thing in the morning. After that, you guys are on your own. You go do whatever you want. And we're like, oh, okay, that's better than nothing. And then they pack up and they drive off. At this point, once the cops leave, everybody gaggles together and we're like, well, what the hell just happened? You know, what are we going to do with our weekend? You know, and we're like, you know, we heard you guys were getting harassed, but, you know, damn, this is a little bit ridiculous. Felt like a drug raid. Right after Bob walked out of his trailer, because he didn't come back out until after the guys left, and everyone's talking for about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. We're comparing notes of what's happening here and there. I know all of a sudden, I don't remember who it was Bob showed the phone to, but he was standing just like 5 feet in front of me, and he showed the phone to someone, and then I think Waylon saw it at that point, and I was like, what's going on? And they showed it to me. There's threatening texts that are being sent anonymously to Bob's phone right then and there. And these aren't ones you're just gonna dismiss. Okay. Honestly, if you ask me, it's just a smear campaign left and right over Bob. I got to admit that right now. As soon as I saw them, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You know, I knew exactly what was happening. I don't want to say specifically what was coming out and everything else, but it was just it was bordering on the ridiculous and the extreme. You know. Anyway, but very threatening. I mean, a cop could probably try to claim something just on those. You know. Yeah. Anyway, we're sitting there and we're talking, and that's at that point when we hear Bob and them say, hey, you know, that they were quoting this, you know, they were quoting my conversation to me that we had on, you know, with you on last week, you know, this kind of thing to the various members. And so after about an hour, they pack up. They've done everything they could. These guys were first class when it first came out. You know, when we got there, they had everything set up. You know, it was you know, a good show. You know, they had everything together. Well, they had to pick everything up that they had, and they started packing it up. They left. Mo was the only one that stayed with us, and so we stayed in the camp for most of that evening. At one point, me and Arlene, and I think his name was Sam, the three of us, we got out, we walked around for about a half mile out down the road, then out into the wilderness, and then come back behind the camp through the woods. Then later at night at dusk, we were all getting antsy, saying, you know, hey, what's going on? And we figured the whole weekend was blown because we knew the cops were still out there. I mean, just they had put that much surveillance in it. Surely they were still watching. And so we figured our chances of seeing anything or having any activity were completely blown. At around 10 o'clock after dark, we decided, screw it, we're going to go ahead and get in the vehicle. We're going to all drive up. It was 6 of us, I believe. No, actually, I think it was about 8 of us, 6 or 8 of us that went up. 6 of us. We went up, we drove about, I'd say, a half a mile, 3/4 of a mile up the road to an intersection. Mo couldn't tell us because of what the cop said. He couldn't say, yeah, go up to this area, but we kind of got an impression, hey, this is, someplace we ought to probably go. We went up there, we hung out for a while, looked with the thermals, looked with the night vision, amused ourselves for an hour and a half, I would say, and then cut back in. No one was really in a mood to do a whole lot of honest, real investigation, not after that afternoon. We get back to camp, we're sitting around campfire. We've got storms that we can see in the distance coming in, and we're just talking. We're checking out the tree line. At this point, I had already set up an audio recorder for that night to just record through the night in case we had any calls. The married couple that were there, they had set up a game cam about 25, 30 yards past where our tents were into the tree line. And we were just sitting there, looking at the trees on thermal and night vision, and just, chit-chatting the night away. That went okay until about 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, we have a vehicle, old beat-up diesel truck, pulls down the logging road, pulls into our camp area, drives right past our camp, goes back to one of the far corners. Guy gets out. He's got this huge load of wood in the back of his truck. Looks like he's starting to dump the wood out of his car. And me and one of the other gentlemen are like, well, hey, at this point, we got a little fire up here. And it's like, if you're just dumping that wood, go ahead and leave it out here. Get him dump it over here. We could use it, So we walk over there. We introduce ourselves. And that gentleman was a nice old man by the name of Chet. Grizzled old logger-looking guy, late 50s, early 60s, I'd say. Looked like he was quite obviously had been working hard and logging most of his life, spent most of it outdoors. Very convincing. Other than the fact he showed up at 1 a.m, no real alarm bells went off yet. We introduced ourselves. We talked with him for 5 minutes. We invited him back up to the camp. He went back up to the camp with us. He pulled his vehicle up next to our little fire in the circle we were sitting in. While he's there, he starts unloading his wood, and we were keeping a small fire because of our using the night vision and everything. We weren't making a large fire at all. Well, this old man goes on to claim that he comes out here regularly on Friday or Saturday nights, that since his sons have moved out of his house, he has nothing to do, and this is just what he does. He comes out in the middle of the woods, builds himself a little fire, sits back, has a few beers. And we're like, oh, yeah, that's a good old boy thing to do. All right, fine, whatever. And he's asking us what we're doing there, and we start telling him, and we pretty much give him most of the story of, hey, this is what happened. We got questioned by the cops, this or that, but we didn't go into specifics. And he's like, well, why are y'all out here? And, we're like, well, we're a bunch of people online that, interested in Bigfoot, and we got together out here for just a weekend, to do this together. And that started a whole conversation. He went through it for about 20 or 30 minutes. And at first his officer, he was doing the standard, there's nothing out here. There's, I've never seen anything. I've been out here 20, 30 years, never seen a thing. As Mo's primarily the one talking to him, with the rest of us interjecting here or there. Within 20 or 30 minutes of that conversation beginning, we have gone from there's absolutely nothing to, I've seen some weird stuff, and I've seen some prints before, but I just wasn't too sure about it. But, this or that. So we went from a non-believer to, yeah, there may be something to it, I'll admit. Well, at that point, if I remember right, Mo decided to call it a night. We're probably 2 o'clock in the morning. The storms are getting closer in. People are starting to check out. I know the married couple and everything else that had the game cam out there, they started having, they started going out to the tree line to check on it. And The couple other people were looking around. Before I knew it, I was the last one sitting at that camp around that fire with this guy, Chet. Didn't even, I wasn't just paying any attention. I'm tired. I've had a long day. Chet all of a sudden starts just kind of nuzzling up and saying, hey, let me ask you something. And I'll be damned if he didn't start asking the exact same questions that the feds were asking earlier that day. He starts wanting to know, so tell me about this, tell me about that, that kind of thing. And I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. I'm like, after we went through all of that, and now we're going to have what obviously has got to be an informant or a plant that just came into the camp. I was like, I'm just, I can't believe this. So I gave him the same quick stock answers that I gave the people before that day. And I was like, hold on, excuse me. I excused myself from the area. And I went over to a couple other people and I said, hey, spread the word. He just did this, just so y'all know, And right at about that point, people started noticing that game cam that had been put out in the woods, through the night vision, its IR lights were just having an epileptic fit. Were just solid, blinking, constant, just, and they normally don't do that.
In front of it.
Well, it's not that I don't know if there was something in front of it or not, because we ended up going out there and investigating it and checking it out, and we ended up walking all around it, and for probably a good 10 minutes, that thing was constantly going, that I'm personally aware of, that I was able to see and everything through my night vision. There was nothing in the immediate vicinity that we could find. Something had to have messed with it, though, because come to find out, actually later, in fact, I don't think I found this out until after a week or two after the expedition was over and everything else. That webcam had been fried. There was the data card was a new data card, I understand, everything else, and it just got wiped. And the cam itself is, I understand, non-functional.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I kind of thought that was a little bit odd. And I didn't, at the time, we knew it had malfunctioned, but we didn't know anything else. At that point, the weather's getting very close. Everyone's deciding, screw it, turn in. We've all decided at this point, with the weather coming in and all that, we're just going to pull our vehicles up to the center of the camp area, and everyone's just going to sleep in their vehicles that can, because it's a pretty substantial thunderstorm that's coming in, and just I don't want to be in a tent with 50-mile-an-hour straight line winds, And so anyway, we're getting in the car. I get in my vehicle, my Durango. That's another thing I forgot to mention that the cops did while they had us there, though. The cops went and either looked at or looked in all of our vehicles. I know I had my vehicle inspected, but that was because I was dumb enough. Well, I won't say dumb enough, but when they asked if anybody had any firearms there that weren't on their person, I let them know that I had my pistol inside my range bag in the back of my car. That got my car inspected. And so one of the cops went back there. He did let me be present when he was doing it, and I watched him. He did. He just verified that the pistol was there. Then he kind of roughly, or just glanced at the rest of the contents, really. But he was primarily just looking at the range weapon. But he did go into the vehicle. However, the female from the very first visit, she was directed to go around and photograph everyone's cars. She went through and made a very visible show of photographing the cars and photographing the license plates. That was one of the things that they did do while we were there. And they had also, I forgot to even mention this, they had taken all of our IDs. And so they recorded all of our, they had our IDs for about an hour and a half, 2 hours before they handed them back. Something I think is interesting, they weren't after me specifically, I can tell. Because I did not know it at the time. I had not yet renewed my license, and it had just very recently, expired. And I'm like, oh crap, I got to renew my license. What I didn't know was that I had a ticket on there still that was cleared up, but it had not had the warning or whatever it is for the outstanding ticket had not been removed on my driving on the record. So I had to go back and get the proof of payment that I had settled the ticket before in order to get my license renewed and everything. The way Texas works, if they had run my license, they would have seen a standing warrant for my arrest because I had an outstanding ticket at the time on their system. And I did not know this until after I got back and went and tried to renew my license. But anyway, they had our IDs that whole time, and I'm sure they ran, I'm sure they ran everything. And they didn't touch that. If they had wanted me for some reason or anything else, they could have had me, at least to inconvenience me, right then and there. Very easy. Okay, I figured that was important, another detail that comes in there. Anyway, we're back to everyone's in their vehicles. Storms are coming in. Weather's starting to get bad. One thing about this area, it had been raining recently. This is the area in Texas that everyone's seeing is having the real big flood problems now, or just recently did, with the rivers all flowing over and everything else. This is that part of Texas. And when we were there, the whole world was wet already just from normal rains that have been coming in. At that point, it's like 3:30 in the morning. I know of a motel 15 miles out. I go over, I knock on one of the people's windows. I give them my cell phone and my cell phone number. And I'm like, look, I'm going to go get a hotel room. It's, I'm not going to stay out here in the rain. After this day and everything else, I'm just going to go get a bed. I'll see you guys first thing in the morning. If I'm not back before when you wake up, give me a call. So I went over to Cold Spring, which was about 15 miles away, and I got a quick hotel. I stayed in a, nice warm bed as I'm hearing this storm just beat the hell out of the world outside. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, I did the smart thing. I come back the next morning. No one calls me. It's 10:30. I come to the camp, and the camp is deserted. I still got all the tents. The equipment is sitting out there. There's no vehicles. There's no people. There's no nothing. It's like a ghost town. I'm sitting there. I'm figuring, okay, maybe they went out. Hey, maybe they went and got something to eat or something like that. I'll give them a few minutes. I waited around 30, 40 minutes. No one showed up. Nothing. And we had all talked the night before. We were going to get together and stay together because we were going to continue this whole weekend. If the Big Thicket guys couldn't, we still were. We had all made definite plans to coordinate and everything else for the rest of the weekend. What we had not done was get everyone's cell phone numbers from each other. Okay, I had left my cell phone number with that married couple from Austin, and that was it. The only other person's number I had was Mo. So I text Mo. It was at, I believe, 11:30. I ended up looking this up and verifying this and everything. I text Mo at like 11:30. I'm saying, hey, I'm at the camp. What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. I get nothing. Kind of concerning me because I have no idea what's going on. I end up going back to town. I get something to eat. I'm trying to give them some time and still not hearing anything. I want to say it was around 1:30. Yeah, I'd say about 1 or 1:30. Mo gives me this one cryptic text that comes back. Just says, the feds have hammered us. We're shut down. And that was it. That was the entire only thing I heard or knew. I couldn't get a hold of anybody, couldn't do anything. And I'm like, well, this is a load of crap. What the hell's going on? And I started thinking about it because there is this whole field of camping equipment that has been left out there. And as far as I can tell, no one's necessarily coming back and claiming it yet. I go out, I start driving around. I'm just, I'm like, well, if I'm on my own, I'm going to go ahead and start checking out some of these spots. The cops had made a point of referring to the code naming of a lot of the areas that the Big Thicket guy's talking about. And they made a point of referencing those with real places and real locations. So, essentially saying, hey, we know all about your operation. We know where Booger Lane is. We know where Monkey Pond is, that kind of a thing. So I decide, well, the heck with it. I'm going to go ahead and drive out, and I'm going to go check some of these locations out in the daylight, and I'm going to see what's going on. First, I stop back at the camp to make sure no one's there. There isn't. No one's there. At that point, I pick up the recorder that I had left out that night before, and it was still actively recording. It was at that point that I realized that I have all of Chet's little discussion and everything else all on audio. Wes, I think I know I forwarded that to you. I don't know if you ever received it or not. But it's not the clearest. But if you turn the volume up, you can hear Chet talking for a good chunk of it. Anyway, I picked up my recorder and I head out and I decide I'm going to go check out where they said Monkey Pond was. And so I go all the way out. I go to this other pond that's out there. This particular one was called Kelly's Pond. It's clear on the other side of the forest. It's on the west side of Interstate 45. I end up out there later that afternoon. I'm walking around. It's the most snake-infested place I've ever seen. I swear there were like 20 garter snakes within 15 feet of me at one point on that trail. I mean, it was. I was really glad that the guys had told me to bring snake boots. Anyway, the important thing I want to say is about this visit at Kelly's Pond, other than the fact that I think I found maybe one or two possible impressions. Nothing to cast or write home about, but enough that you could see a trail. Mm-hmm. I left my recorder out there near the entrance to the Kelly's Pond area. Okay. Brand new batteries, brand new SIM card in it. Left it running. I left it running at about 5 o'clock that afternoon. I had just gotten over 18 hours of recording off of that recorder the night before on the identical setup, fresh batteries, fresh SIM card. It had worked flawless. This thing was brand new. I left it there. I head back. I'm still not hearing from anybody. At this point, I have contact. I put a little bit of a cryptic message up on the forum thinking, well, any of the other members, maybe they'll check the forum. I'm saying, hey, get a hold of me here, blah, blah, blah. At that point, Nobby ends up hitting me up for information, and he and I get on the phone with Nobby, and I'm giving Nobby the rundown of everything that's happened at this point. And Nobby ends up being my kind of secondhand witness throughout this whole weekend at this point, because he and I are staying in contact on the phone. And anyway, I go into Huntsville. I end up getting another hotel while I'm there. I get dinner. I'm talking to Nobby on the phone and everything, and I'm posting on the forum that I'm probably going to go head out and back out, and I'm going to hang out at Kelly's Pond and do some night work by myself. At that point, Tim Sermons contacts me on the forum real quick and says, "Hey Steve, come by the hospital and see me." And so I realized I was just down the street from him. And so I did. I go over there and I meet with Tim. He and I talk. We have a discussion for about maybe 10, 15 minutes out in the parking lot. And at which point, I get a little bit more of an idea of, they've been pulling this on us for a while. This kind of thing, this kind of stuff is nothing new. Anyway, and then that's it. At that point, I'm like, the heck with it. I'm not going to go out to Kelly's Pond. I'm just going to go ahead and go back to my hotel. I go to the hotel, get up the next morning. I head out to Kelly's Pond to get my recorder. Pick the recorder up. It's shut off. It's the batteries are dead and everything else. Everything is just dead on that recorder. This recorder was about maybe 30 or 40 feet off of the road between two fallen logs. It was well hidden. Okay. At that point, after I picked up my recorder, I'm like, okay, we'll see what's happening. I notice I've only got about 7, 8, 9 hours. I think it was 9 hours recording time actually on it. It was well half of what it should have been. At that point, I go back to the campsite. No one has still come back to the camp. I'm not hearing from anybody. And so I just said, screw it. I'm not going to leave this stuff here where, they can come back and say we were littering or abandoning, dumping stuff or anything like that. So I pack up the whole camp. And I am still the proud owner of the entire Big Thicket camp. I've got 4 brand new tents.
Yeah.
I picked that up. I got the shower. I've got all that. And I'm just. But anyway, I picked the whole thing up because I'm just like, someone's got to do something about this. And I know those guys have just gotten the hell beat out of them by the law enforcement and everything else. The last thing they want to do is come back out to that camp area. And so I just sat there and I pick up the whole thing. At that point, I turn around, I head, I start heading back home. I go to my parents that night, and then I go back to my house the next day. While I'm going over the audio that night from the Kelly's Pond, that's when I realized there was something odd about the equipment. Because the audio, my recorder was sitting there and running fine until about 2 a.m., which is roughly about the same time that game cam the night before at the campsite, when it had just started freaking out and then fried. Though at the time I didn't know it had fried. My recorder was recording great, and I've got this wonderful recording of this car coming up out of nowhere, or a truck or whatever it is, coming down the logging road. You can hear it stop near this puddle, and it's just right, I don't want to say right next, but it's as close as it could get to where the recorder is, it sounds like. And it sits there, it comes to a stop, the vehicle idles, no one ever gets out, nothing. I mean, you can hear this clear. Yeah, the vehicle is just idling. Then you hear the vehicle start to creep forward, and I know exactly where it was because I can hear it start to go through a large mud puddle, which is right there near the entrance of Kelly's Pond. I know exactly where this vehicle is. As soon as that vehicle starts creeping into that mud puddle, everything dies on my machine. That's the end of it. My machine was never touched. It was never approached. It's just like that game cam the night before. But for some reason, my batteries that the day before had gone 18 hours. We're talking the same AA's out of the same pack, or rather different AA's out of the same pack, though. I'd gotten twice the performance the night before out of that pack as what I got out of the other two out of the pack that next night. There was no reason for my equipment to fail that way. And it did. It just was a complete battery drain, shut down, everything else. Strangest thing. And it happens literally as that vehicle starts to pull away. It's like, yeah, we did our job. Now we're going to go. And I've got that audio and that quits. Now, on a side note, I think I've got earlier that night a few calls, but they're very much in the background, and they quickly get stepped on by dogs and coyotes after that. So I can't say for sure, it's just one of those, well, that's interesting kind of a thing. Right. But the behavior with this vehicle coming up and it dying, and the same thing happening with that trail camp, while we know we had an informant in the campground, and the fact that these guys were repeating conversations that everybody was having before they had arrived. And I know, like what I was telling you with Waylon about how he was coming out to get webcams and they had been missing or whatever, them taunting about equipment either malfunctioning or equipment being taken. Now, if this was a legitimate investigation, it doesn't make sense to me because I know what they were claiming, and what they were claiming, I don't want to say a parking ticket, but it's probably more like a speeding ticket. And it's not a big, I've looked it up. It's not a big fine. We're talking like a $200 or $300 fine at the most. It's something that a park ranger could have given you. And instead, we have this big show of force. We've got all of this manpower and equipment and obvious time that is being put into this group to be observed, to be watched. That is bizarre. Everything that they did, quite honestly, could have been done by the very first two officers who came into our camp. They could have done the exact same thing and accomplished the same thing, get the same questions answered, write their little tickets or whatever it is they're going to do. At that point, it could have been done by two two cops.
Yeah. Right.
And is this really what probably, I'd say it was probably, there was enough cops there that I'm sure that was their entire shift for the National Forest, and they were all there.
A couple things. One thing is, I know Bob and all those guys, I intentionally didn't have them on the show for a reason, but I'm really glad that you came on, Stephen,
Right.
because I wanted you, and I cleared it with the guys. I said, is it cool if I have Stephen on? I wanted to have someone from there who could actually recount what happened, because I got bits and pieces of some information that was there. So I really do appreciate you coming on. But
Right.
yeah, it's interesting. It's the actual fine that they got was operating a business in the national forest without a permit is the fine they got. Commercial business without a permit. And the
Right.
max you can be fined for it
Okay.
in that county is $150. So you're right. It's interesting that they have such a show of force. They bring it in like a drug raid for a bunch of people looking for Bigfoot. Now, if Bigfoot's not a real creature,
Yeah.
then what are they worried about? What do they care about?
Yep.
They do screw with these guys a lot. I mean, they really do. A lot of people online, a lot of the other sites or other researchers call BS on it. But these guys really do get harassed like this a lot. And it happens a lot. And they're constantly all over these guys.
Well, the thing that I find interesting is on the one hand, they're there, and obviously they've got you under surveillance. They've got your camp bugged or something. So they can hear everything that's going on. Or there's somebody that's near enough in a ghillie suit with a mic over there that's sitting in the woods listening to everything, less likely. So they know exactly what's going on. They're listening to it. But on the other hand, they're doing an investigation and they're not taking SIM cards. They're instead making the equipment fail with like some sort of
Yes.
long-distance EMP or something like that fries it.
Yeah, and you're exactly right there. And I've been real curious to know. I've been looking into this myself to see what technologies are actually out there that can drain the batteries and doing everything else. And you can find references on the internet and everything else to military grade equipment that looks like it's trying to go in. It looks like they're approaching that kind of an ability and everything else. What I actually witnessed, I have not been able to find direct references to, but you can kind of read between the lines and see, what they do acknowledge and everything publicly is going in that direction. It's getting those kinds of capabilities. I find it very interesting that they would have that here.
Right, and that's the whole thing. It's not a civilian technology that would be available to civilian law enforcement.
Right. As a side note, you don't want to be paranoid but when you're going through a situation like this, you don't really know what to do, so you become hyper alert about little things. I know my phone, God bless my Apple iPhone. That thing's bulletproof. I never have a problem with it. I had problems left and right with that thing for a week. It started that Saturday, and it went for a week before it cleared up. And it only cleared up because I ended up dumping the whole thing, getting a new SIM card, and reloading it. Again, that's a little bit bizarre. The timing I find odd. I'm not gonna say I was under surveillance or anything like that, and everything else. But I am gonna say, coincidences can only be so much coincidence.
Well, what's interesting is that they tried to get a permit, and I was privy to some of that information. You probably already know, Stephen. I'm sure Duke knows, but and we can do that in a future show, depending on how this whole thing plays out. But that, just so the audience knows, I guess that was a shady deal trying to get that permit. It was like trying to get a permit from the mafia. It was kind of like you do a favor for us, or how much you're going to pay us to. It wasn't your normal, a permit for that's $39.95 for 2 days or whatever. It was more of a real shady deal. Just from my experience down there with those guys, I think they're getting too close to the truth for comfort for those guys down there. And then they're bringing in people. So obviously they're listening to the show, because I don't think the guys ever promoted it anywhere else. So obviously, hi, federal officers, if you're listening. Thanks for listening to the show. Obviously, someone's listening to the show.
It's the best advertising y'all can get, Wes.
Yeah, obviously, if they're taking the time to listen. And it just amazes me, too. And the other thing, too, about the tickets is they backdated a lot of those tickets. And they made a mistake, and I'm not going to say on which one, but they made a mistake on one of the tickets because they put a date in there prior to the expeditions even starting. Even before the guys even dreamed of doing the expeditions, they have a date in there that's wrong. And so it's just a shady deal. It sounds like a drug bust. As I was listening to you Stephen, describe what's happening. Describe what you're experiencing. I'm honestly picturing like a drug bust.
It was. I work with law enforcement for a living. I'm not law enforcement, but I work with law enforcement. I know how these guys operate. I deal with them on a daily basis. That's what I mean. That was their standard operating procedure. Was just like a drug bust. They just ran. They rolled all the vehicles in at once. They surrounded the place, and they gathered everyone up. The only thing that wasn't like a drug bust was they weren't brandishing their weapons when they came in. I'll give them credit for that. They never brandished weapons. They didn't do anything. They didn't get out of line necessarily with us. These guys were calm, cool, and professional. For that matter, the more I've looked back at it, I really don't think most of them actually even knew what was really going on. I think they were just out there. It's another day in the job. We've got this, this investigator's come in with this, he's got this information. We're going to support him. We're going to go out and get these guys. I think most of these are stand-up guys. I do not want to denigrate or to imply that the cops we dealt with were anything more than honest, or anything less than honest, rather. I really do think they were. I mean, these guys were human. That being said, I'm wondering who's giving them the information or giving them the directives coming from above that even got them to start paying attention to this to begin with. We in Washington, I did expeditions all the time up in Washington. I helped arrange expeditions. We did this kind of thing all the time in National Forest and never once saw a ranger or law enforcement. Mm-hmm. In over 2 years, right up there west near where you live, right up there in Skookum, in that area. No one ever bothered us. The first time I step into this with this group down here in Texas, I'm having a drug raid practically. I mean, we're raided. We're searched. We're detained. God bless Texas, but this was just a little bit overkill and ridiculous. And the only thing that I could walk away from was stay away from these guys. It's bad business for you if you're associated with them, and if you're in our forest. That's the most clear answer that you could get from the whole interaction was Bigfoot people are not welcome here.
They want them to have some sort of a business license. That was the issue that that they gave them a ticket over. And
that was that. Oh no, I was about to say that appeared to be, especially towards the end, that was the leg they were standing on.
Okay, so they didn't have anything else they could nail them for, so they figured they'd just harass them over there.
No, and because I don't want to get specific, I'm going to let Wes say, Wes can speak to what Wes knows and everything. I myself, I don't want to get into what exactly they were done. The business license thing, as far as I know of, is public knowledge, so that's fine.
Right.
I will say this: what they were asking, and what they were looking for, and what they kept hounding, was a ridiculous. It just seemed petty. It really did not jive with why we had this many people out.
Right. No way it justified the use of all the people and the equipment and everything else that was going on.
You got to understand, the guys were ordered to leave the forest. They were ordered not to show anybody anything, not to share any evidence. They're like, they can't do any of that. They have to leave. They got to leave now. As soon as we leave, they are leaving.
So, I'm just going to be
and that's how it was.
This, but would you think that the same situation would happen if there was a group down there that was conducting tours to go to the big thicket to say, go in search of a leprechaun? Okay, we're going to go do an expedition to go look for leprechauns down here. You think you get that kind of a reaction?
I would hope not, but I'm not sure that that's the case. I mean,
yeah. Oh yeah.
It quite honestly, I mean, this was so bizarre and out of the ordinary for the situation. I mean,
well, yeah, and the thing is with the ticket, Duke, is the actual ticket, the fine that they got. I'd have to look up the actual ordinance. Most of them didn't get fined. Most of them, there's no amount on the ticket.
No, I was about to say, my understanding is most of them have been notified that they should be contacted for a court date, and they're still waiting on that. So,
yeah. And the thing is that basically the fine is operating a commercial business in the national forest without a permit is basically what they got hit with. And it's a $150 fine. So it just amazes me that they spent so much time and effort. Just think of the amount of money bringing in 6 to 8 officers for 2 to 3 hours, pulled away from other things, pulled away from like poachers to go bust some people, quote unquote, operating a business in the national forest without a permit. It's like, and to show the force that they showed, I wanted to go in more into the government cover up, but I'm so fascinated by this with you, Stephen, and the whole story. And it amazes me, and I'm sure people are going to want to go out with these guys now. I know they're not doing the expeditions, but when I was out with these guys, I saw I heard and experienced some real stuff out there, stuff I was shocked by. And I know almost every expedition, people have walked away and they've experienced real stuff going on. Mm-hmm. And I think it kind of pissed someone off down there. They were like, hey, what are these guys doing? And it amazes me. The other thing, I know the text message you're talking about with Bob. I was on the phone with him when he was getting them. And I said to Bob, I
think I remember that now, yeah.
Yeah, I said, hey, Bob, check for a Wi-Fi signal. I said, are all the officers gone? He said, yeah, they're all gone. I said, open up your phone, check for a Wi-Fi signal. And there was still a really strong Wi-Fi signal nearby. I think it was like FBI something. Yep. And then it changed to like a question mark or a symbol like 30 minutes later. Bob said it had changed. And actually, he sent me screenshots of that, of the Wi-Fi signal. Someone was watching, someone was close by, and I'm sure Chet wasn't just a normal, I'm going to go out at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, drink beers, and build a fire. That's the behavior of a sociopath, I think.
I'll tell you what, man, my image of old man rednecks got shattered by Chet. I'm just not ever going to, I'll just, that was, Chet just threw me over the top with the whole situation, because at that point, I figured after everyone had left and everything else, surely whatever was going on, they had quit their observations. And then when Chet was there and when Chet started asking the same things and it became apparent what it was, and he had to know he was blowing his cover when he did it. I'm sure he had to and everything. But he tried his damnedest to not. He was trying to innocently form questions, but when you're asking the same questions that were being asked earlier that day, almost verbatim, and everything, you just can't hide the fact. Those are not questions that were an obvious thing that in a conversation, even in our conversation we were having and everything else, those weren't questions that you would initially think of. And so they were very specific, targeted type questions. It just blew my mind, because I was like, good Lord, they've driven most of the crew out and they are still observing people here. What's going on here? And the only thing I can think of, really, it's not so much, he may have been there for whatever their investigation was or is or whatever, but the bigger message there is, hey, we still know you're here. We are watching you still. Don't get comfortable. It was, Wes, the area we were in, if I understand correctly, was very close to the area that you were in. We were, I understand there are they had actual activity in that location before, and I'm thinking you were there, if I remember right, in that one particular campground. And then you went out, because I know you went to like Monkey Pond and all of that farther up north and everything, but we didn't have nothing that night. That forest was dead. There was no activity. There was no nothing. And we just knew that, there was too much of a presence of other people that were out there. We never saw them. We never did anything. Now, I will say this. While the cops were there, I know Waylon had made a comment about how he thought, and he could swear he saw what he thought was a Sasquatch or something out in the tree line while the cops were there, that he saw one like peeking around a tree or doing something like that. And I remember seeing him a couple of times staring off in this one particular direction, but I always assumed he was looking towards the cops. And it was later he mentioned, no, that, there was something over there and everything else. Now, I don't know for sure if he actually saw one of them, if he actually had a sighting. I'm still leaning towards, I'm betting he saw some idiot in a ghillie suit.
Yeah.
That he may have seen some movement or something like that. And, but we did. So in that regard, we had reference to there being movement outside of the camp by at least one person that was there. I didn't personally witness it, but I did have the conversation where I was told about it afterwards. And so I have every reason to believe we were never alone that day or that night. I also, now I believe, I don't think I was ever alone the whole weekend I was down there, because, and I base that entirely on what happened to my recording equipment, which was straight line, probably 30 miles distance on the opposite side of that national forest. And it still got messed with that next day or that night. And, so, I'm thinking someone had to know either I had gone to that area or that I had equipment in that area. It's just too bizarre that my equipment died like that. That makes, again, I go back to, that was my one real Twilight Zone moment that capped off the whole weekend and everything and kind of made it go up. I did. Oh, no, I won't go into that.
I got a question for you.
Go ahead, Doug.
You say you have you say you got the entire camp still in your possession. What happened to the rest of the campers?
They went off. My understanding is since we got back, and we've communicated through the forum, and a few of us have emailed back and forth. There was one couple that had been there one expedition prior. They were the couple from Austin. My understanding is they just said the hell with this the next day. They're the ones I left my phone number with. I thought they were the ones of all people that were going to stick around in the area. They actually went ahead and went home that next Saturday. They were only 2 or 3 hours away. And so they blew out of town. They got their stuff and they left. The other people, the people that had flown in, they didn't have their airline tickets were all for Saturday or Sunday evening.
Right.
But they all got hotels, and they stayed at their hotels. They didn't feel comfortable going back to the site or to have anything else to do with it. They were fully scared off. Evidently, I was the only hard-headed one who sat there and honestly was, being stupid and saying, I'm not doing anything wrong here. I'm not, and so I ended up being out there, and I'm the one that picked up the pieces. And I was kind of let down by that because, to be perfectly honest, I spent that whole Saturday and almost all of that Sunday actually going out in the woods by myself and looking around. I've got several photos of over especially on Sunday, and of the area that I found out is Monkey Pond. I did not know this before. Right outside Monkey Pond, where I've got good tracks.
Nice.
I've got pictures of good tracks and everything else that I was able to find.
That is loss for you. It was worth it for you to stick around there. It
was worth it for me. It was fairly productive for me. I mean, now we had ideal conditions for tracks in the fact that we had just been inundated for days with rain, right. And so any old tracks were essentially being washed away. But these were relatively new, and I found them quite by accident because they had filled up with water. And when they were filled, they were just filled up perfect, almost like they were a cast, and you could just see the perfect outline and everything. And I've got a couple of them. They're just off of a road. I was like right there. And then I come to find out later, I'm talking to Tim Sermons, and I'm telling him where I did this and where I found that. And that at that point he's like, you're right outside of Monkey Pond. Because you were literally right next to it. And I was like, I was starting to wonder, and everything. Which now, and I will say this. Now, this is interesting in its own right. The information that the cops gave out that Friday when they were telling all the code words and the code locations, and then they started linking it with physical locations and things like that, they got most of that incorrect. Or they were totally being misleading. And they said that in such a way that I know it was like, yeah, we're giving away all their secrets. Y'all want to know what it is? Here it is. And so, because at the time they equated Monkey Pond with Kelly's Pond. And I've now, since then, I found out and everything else that that's not, that wasn't right. Kelly's Pond is nowhere near where Monkey Pond is. Kelly's Pond is an interesting area, and it's near a couple of their other sites and things like that. But it's not that infamous Monkey Pond that is so famous because of what Wes experienced and everything. So they were misdirecting even at that point. Again, looking back at it, again, something else that kind of makes you, scratch your head and go, hey, what was up with this? What did they came out with an entire agenda of just sabotaging and discrediting this group of researchers. That is ultimately exactly what they were after, it seemed. I mean, it was as close to character assassination as you could get.
Well, and it does the opposite. That's what these idiots don't realize, is it does the complete opposite. Because what other researchers out there have you heard of that are, basically just short of a drug raid by, the Department of Interior or, the Forestry Service, or these guys generally don't act like that. The Forestry Service guys generally are pretty cool guys when you run into them.
Yeah, they are.
They generally have as much authority as a police officer, sometimes even more than a police officer, and most people don't realize that. Like a game warden here in Washington State actually has more authority than a cop pulling you over.
That's the same way it is in Texas. A game warden's probably your most powerful law enforcement official that's actually out there.
Yeah.
And everything. And if they're acting in that capacity, they pretty much have carte blanche. So, yeah.
Well, and it should, if I was a taxpayer in Texas, I'd be pissed over this. I'd be like, you spent how much? Can you imagine the amount of tax
Yeah,
dollars?
but now you got to remember this, though. None of the men and women that we were dealing with when they were there, none of them were state. These were all federal. If nothing else, it was just, there's the part of me that wants to try to justify everything and think rational and say, okay, let's put A and B together. Let's take a step back and let's look at this coolly and calmly. Okay, let's say that this was their legitimate reason. And if it was such an excess of resources for such a little crime or potential crime that it was overkill and it was overbearing. That in its own right is extremely scary. But I even that level of bureaucratic mess I find really hard to understand. And so, I mean, you come back to, there's got to be more to it. This couldn't be just a snafu of that proportion where, but you go back to where you hear these stories of like, the grandma who gets the drug raid where they, here comes ATF and ICE and, and everybody else, and they're all busting in her door because they think she's a crack house. And it's actually this little 80-year-old woman. I mean, you hear these horror stories that occasionally happen, and you find out, well, they hit the wrong house, or they did this, or they did that, and they've made a mistake.
Right.
It's got if that. The problem is, I just can't believe that that's the case. They had too much information. These guys had been looking for a while at these guys, and. So I can't say, hey, they just hit the wrong target or something like that. They put a lot of effort into this, and it's disturbing. I mean, because honestly, I mean, we were out there looking for Bigfoot. I mean, we were in the eyes of the world, we're a bunch of kooks. Now if you want to invest that kind of money and time to investigate kooks, I mean, yeah, they'd have more ground to say, yeah, we got a bunch of kooks out in the woods with guns. I mean, that I could almost understand, but that's not why they were out there, and that's not what they were doing, but.
Well, we'll have to do a part two to the show. I think I've been told in the past that, and I'm sure they're changing their mind on it because of the show, but I've been told in not so many words in the past, it doesn't matter. People want to come on, share their encounters. What they care about is what you can prove. And I was just talking to the guy. You guys know the famous case. I put it up on the website of the gentleman that claimed to have shot one. There was 2 creatures. It happened in, I believe it was Virginia or Kentucky, one of those states. But anyway, he had shot one, and it fell out of the tree. And he said the second one picked up the creature he shot, and he was describing to me in full detail what he shot, what he saw, and he called the game warden. Game warden comes out, and he's really telling his wife, he goes, it wasn't a bear, it wasn't a bear, it wasn't a bear. I think I shot a gorilla. And the game warden comes out, so he tells the game warden, well, it was Bigfoot. Game warden, right off the bat, doesn't want to hear anything of it, thinks this guy's nuts, pissed he had to drive all the way out to investigate this shooting. Finally convinces the game warden he'll take him out to the location. And the minute they start walking up, he goes, Wes, there was huge human-like footprints everywhere. And even in some of the tracks were blood where the other one had stepped in. And there was blood all up and down the tree. There was blood on the ground. There was obvious signs of 2 very large creatures through here. And then he was explaining to the game warden how it went up the rock wall. And lo and behold, he gets paid a visit by 2 guys. One good cop, one bad cop. And they threatened this guy like you wouldn't believe. They threatened his wife. They threatened his job. They threatened to discredit him in town. Told him basically to shut his mouth, never talk about this. And as him and I talked, the more I started to realize they thought he walked away with evidence. They thought he walked away with some sort of, he kept some of the blood or something. They must have thought he walked away with something. Because otherwise it's just another encounter story. It doesn't, but I think they thought he walked away with something. So I think what's happening to the guys in the big thicket, they are coming across real stuff down there. And then now they're bringing people down there into these locations and showing them real stuff, collecting evidence, basically collecting evidence. And I don't think they care for it too much down there. I don't think those boys down in Texas want that coming out.
I think you're right about that. The guys were teasing me, and they've teased me since then. I stay in contact with one of them. I ended up making a friend of one of them. But there's a couple of them that I've talked to either privately or on the forum and stuff. And it's funny because they like to tease me, and I guess I've gotten this reputation on the forum. I'm like the skeptic for some reason and everything, and it's mainly just because I'm like, hey, look, my personal view is most of it's hearsay until we prove a body or something like that. And so because of that, personally, people like to call me a skeptic. That being said,
I think that's a realist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's how I've always tried to be. That's where I look at it. It's like, hey, look, there's a difference between knowing and being able to prove something and everything else. And so let's just be real about this. These, just from what I saw down there, yeah, there's enough that makes me, think, well, there might be something out here. Did I have an experience? Did I catch something direct on audio? No. The footprints that I found, I know they're footprints. I saw them. I've got, I got them right there. Were they castable? No, they were filled with water, and everything else. Could I prove it in court? No, I couldn't, and everything else. So, I'm going to tell the whole world right now, it's enough to make you go, but it's not enough, to prove anything else. But I'll tell you what did convince me that there is something going on down there, and that was the cops. Before I went down there and experienced this, I was still 50-50 that these guys were nutcases. I'm old school Bigfoot. I have, it wasn't until I even started listening to your show about a year ago and everything else that I was even willing to entertain the idea that we had Sasquatch west of the Rockies. Mm-hmm. Okay. When I had been out of the scene for about 16 years, and the last I'd been active was up in Washington around 2000. And that's where my world was. That's where they were. California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, those areas. After and so honestly, I hear Bob Garrett. He talks a good game. I hear Tim. I hear Mo. I see, I hear Waylon and all them. And I hear all this, and I'm just like, these guys are either telling the truth or these guys are pulling a fast one. And so, I went down there as much as anything else just to prove to myself, just to see, okay, what is there to this? What's going on? Did I get a Bigfoot experience? No. I got a conspiracy.
Yeah.
I mean, my world went through, I had such a paradigm shift after this event. I mean, that, now when people come, and I feel so bad because I was one of those people that kind of rubbed wrong on the last Insider episode. Something didn't seem right and everything else. And, now.
Let me cancel your account.
No, that's fine. I wasn't one of the ones that jumped all over you. I'll be
I'm
honest.
just playing with you.
I was kind of like, I know, but it seemed like it was going so far out and everything. And now I'm sitting there going, damn, I wish we could have gotten those other 2 episodes because, and everything, because I'm paying a lot more attention to it now because this just played right into that. They couldn't have orchestrated this. This couldn't have been set up. I mean, this was large. This was a major operation. That wasn't these guys.
Yeah.
And so if you ask me, their legitimacy just went to 100%. I mean, as a general group, they've got something. They're onto something. They've done something. There has to be something there because they've really upset somebody.
Well, it's sure funny that they blow this thing out of the water after they capture that drone footage, after they, I don't know if there's any coincidence with that or not, but it seems funny that it just seems odd.
It does. And everything. I think when that drone footage is released, I think it's going to be very interesting. I think it'll be, if they ever get to the point that they feel safe enough to release it, and I'm sure that's a very good consideration on their part right now. Do they feel safe enough? I do not know for sure, but I have a suspicion these guys are sitting on a mountain of evidence. They've got a lot of documentation, and I don't think they feel safe to breathe a word because this is just the latest incident. I mean, they've got evidently had a whole history of stuff like this. It wasn't ever as large. I understand. This was the biggest, most upfront, but they've been having stuff like this evidently for 2 or 3 years now. And we heard rumors of this. I made my arrangements. I went down and I was going to see for myself. And holy crap. It just, you couldn't have, I couldn't in my wildest dreams have come up with something like the scenario I had that weekend. Well, no, I was asked, I was asked because one of their legs they were standing on for the whole business thing was the fact that everyone contributed money down there towards a common pot for food and things like that. And I was asked if I wanted my money back. And the best, this is the honest truth. I told him, I said, there's absolutely no way in hell I want my money back. I got more out of my money than I ever expected. I mean, I was like, that was the best money I've spent in a long time. I mean,
thanks for the shows, guys.
Yeah, exactly. And God help me now because, I'm not involved. I'm outside. I'm not a part of that group, so I can't speak for them, and I don't do anything else. And I sure as hell don't want anybody listening on here to think that I am, because I'm not, and everything. And I don't have anything. All I know is what I saw.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to have you on is because you were there. I know you're not part of the big thicket. Like I said, I really think these guys are onto something. I know a lot of people called BS, on Bob and Tim and Mo and all those guys that, oh yeah, right, the government's watching you guys. Oh yeah, right, this and that. I'm telling you, it goes on down there. They watch these guys like a freaking hawk. And that was the biggest show I'd ever heard of that they've done. But these guys getting followed around or getting followed around in SUVs is nothing new. I mean, it happens to them all the time. Those cops that will follow them around all the way throughout the night, never once pull them over, but we'll sit and you know these roads, Stephen, you're in the middle of freaking nowhere. There's no reason for, when I was there was cops that were showing up and down the road, and then they left, and I asked the guys, I said, well, we're in the middle of nowhere. What are these cop cars doing out here? Tim was like, well, it's just that they know we're here, they're watching, but they hadn't done anything at that point, but they were rolling up and down on these guys. But and keep in mind for the audience, these guys are looking for Bigfoot. You know what I mean? They're not running a drug operation. There's no prostitution ring going on out here. And for them to, they didn't, like you said with their driver's license, as soon as you told me that, I knew they didn't run anyone's driver's license. It was just a way to intimidate everyone.
It's intimidate. Yeah, it was entirely. And even if they did run the license, the fact that they didn't take advantage of that. You see what I'm saying? I mean, again, I go back to, but, I'm not part of the group. I was just one of the guys that were from out of town, and so according to their storyline, I mean, because I remember asking a cop 2 or 3 times, I kept wanting to, I kept asking them, I was like, are you implying, because of your questioning everything else, let me get this straight. You're questioning me, you're detaining me and everything else, but the natures of your questions really indicate that you believe I'm a victim, and I'm like, you're implying that. And the cop's like, no, I'm not implying that at all and everything else. And I'm like, that is the only logical conclusion that can come from your questioning and everything else, is that you feel like in some way I am being victimized here. They could have had anything for any reason. And they just let it go. They wanted people, I firmly believe, they wanted people to go out and essentially kind of tell the tale of, man, we went out there and these cops were all over us. I don't, and as much as anything else, I think they just wanted to make the big thicket uncomfortable. And they have made it that way. They have made that whole forest an uncomfortable area to be in. I'm going to think long and hard before I head back down there. And if I do, I'm not going to be telling anybody I'm going back down there.
And that's exactly what they're shooting for. They're just trying to make it uncontrollable for anybody to want to be there.
Right. And so, and if I do go down there, I'll be damned if I'm not going to go on private property. I mean, it's this public property and being under their jurisdiction. This completely, you hear stories of odd happenings on federal land and things like, oh, and you know what? And I didn't. Here, I'll sink myself. I'm probably going to get a visit by the MIB or something tonight or tomorrow anyway for this. Here I am sounding paranoid, but right now I don't put past anything. I failed to mention the first time that me and one of the women and another guy, when we walked out, we'd walked down about a half mile down the road, and then we cut into the forest, and then we came back into the camp through the woods, okay? I don't know if you ever saw on the forum, but I posted up a real nice close-up of a coral snake that I found. This incidentally, just for people to know, Sam Houston's got more snakes in it than I've ever seen in my life. And that's saying something, because I grew up in Louisiana. Wow. And everything. And I thought I knew snakes. I mean, I had snakes in my backyard growing up. This place is crawling. This place, I've never seen so many snakes as out there. But anyway, as we were out there, actually not far from where we found and I photographed that coral snake, just in the middle of the woods, there's a nice 6-inch air vent, cast iron, coming right out of the ground, then turned at a 45 with a vent cap on it, and it's just an open air vent. It's going down underground. It's been there at least maybe 20 years, 15, 20 years. Well, maybe not that long. Maybe I'm guessing that long because the trees had to be at least 20, 25 years old and everything else. And the trees were in close enough proximity that for this to have been excavated and dug out and everything else, it had to have been done when those trees weren't there. But this was quite obviously an air vent to something down below that ground.
That's interesting.
I just thought it was odd at that point. I didn't even take a picture of it, and I should have. But I could walk you back there, and I could point the thing out. I did. I could get us within 100 yards of it and find out. Oh yeah, here it is. And I say that only because I've got that picture of that snake, and I've got a geolocation of the snake, and I know it was very close to where the snake was. But yeah, out in the middle of nowhere. I did look around. We thought it was odd. There was no obvious hatches or openings or anything. It was completely undisturbed forest. Over near closer to the road, there were some old berms where it looks like, bulldozers had gone through, piled up some wood or piled up dirt, things like that, that had been there long enough that overgrowth had started going over them. But when you're in a completely flat wood and then all of a sudden you get these berms, they're quite obvious as to what they actually are. Mm-hmm. But those were several hundred yards, 200 or 300 yards from where I found this vent. But I saw it, this woman saw it, and this other gentleman that was with us. We all three saw that vent, and we're looking at it and everything else. We did think that was odd. I thought I was, the other thing that I thought was odd was while I was driving around on my way out in the middle of nowhere, that ended up being close to a location that I know you had gone to. But I don't want to say it right now because I'm thinking you want to keep this for the air and everything. I ran across an odd U.S. government facility, totally unmarked, out in the middle of nowhere, brand new fencing, brand new buildings everywhere, not a window on any of it. Looked really, really odd. This place just stood out of nowhere, and it was in the middle of nowhere. One nice sign on it that said U.S. Olympic Team Committee or whatever, and it's a like Olympics gymnastics training center or something. This place looked deader than a doornail, tied up like Fort Knox, and no windows, no doors, no nothing. You can see it on Google. You can sit there and you Google Earth it and you look it down and you can read about it. You see little kids saying, "Yeah, I'm going there this summer," that kind of thing. A couple of them and all that, but not a whole lot. So evidently, I guess it's legitimate. But man, that's a huge facility for something like that, and it sure looks like a prison. Yeah. I mean, and again, it's just something else federal. You just don't expect to see out in the middle of the woods. Now, on a side note, this is where it gets interesting. And this is after I've come back home, and it was Mother's Day. We were at my in-laws' house, and my brother-in-law was there with his girlfriend. And I did not know his girlfriend very well. Ends up being she is from this area. She actually has some property down there fairly close to where I'm talking about right now. And it's just totally random happenstance. But she was, they were asking me how my weekend was, and I was kind of giving them a rundown and everything. And the first thing she did was she sat there and she goes, "Oh, did you hear the monkey howls?" And I was like, "The what?" And she goes, "Yeah, you hear all the zoo animals and stuff like that out in the woods?" She goes, "Man, we grew up listening to that kind of stuff." And I was like, "Really?" And she goes, "Yeah." She goes, "We had always heard as kids that in the past there had been like a zoo train that had derailed in the area, and all these animals had gotten out, and they never caught them, and they were living in the woods and everything." And because I had asked her, I said, "Did you ever hear Bigfoot or anything like that out there?" And she said no, she hadn't heard of Bigfoot, but she had always heard of these animals, and she had just been told that these zoo animals were out there living, and she swears she could hear the monkeys at night growing up at times. She says every now and then you just hear them start cooking up. And I played her your Jurassic Park sounds, and she goes, "That's exactly them." Turns out being when I looked on a map and I found out where Monkey Pond was, she lives only about 2 miles from that. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, now it's straight line though. It's probably 8 miles by road, but straight line, it's about 2 miles. That facility that I was talking about, she was aware of. And she was telling me, she goes, "I never have seen anyone out there." She goes, "That place has always been run down and everything else. It was there for a while, and it looked like it was closed for several years. You never saw anything." She goes, "And then right after I moved, or right before I moved and everything. She goes, they rebuilt the whole thing. She goes, it's up there now. She goes, but you never see people out there. You don't do anything. Is it a legitimate facility? Yeah, it could be. It very well could be. It more than likely is. It really is. It's just damn weird that it's out in the middle of the Sam Houston National Forest.
Duke, was there anything you wanted to add to it?
Well, about the only thing that I could add to that was just a little bit more fuel to the conspiracy fire, and that's that I actually know the person that did the insider interview, too. And things have not gone well since then. There's actually been multiple attempts on that person's life. So it's, it's not a joke.
Yeah, no, it's not. And I'm glad that you had a chance, Stephen, to thank you so much for coming on the air, and thank you so much for sharing it. Because when I say it, I think sometimes people check out, or when Bob comes on and says it, sometimes I think people check out. But to have other people around that actually saw it, I think that was law enforcement's worst mistake they made, was doing what they did. They won in the short run. They shut the whole thing down. But in the long run, people are going to hear this, and people are going to go, you know what's going on down there? What's the deal with the show of force? What's the deal with the
yeah?
And like I said before, I've been told in not so many words, you can have all the people you want on with encounters, but they don't care about that. They only care about when you can actually prove something or you have some real evidence. That's when they really start cracking down. And I honestly think that's what's going on down there. But we'll have to do another one of these shows. We'll have to do a part 2 because there's a lot of other stuff I wanted to bring up and add to it. And we'll just have to do a part 2. And, Stephen, you're welcome to come back on and do a part 2 with us if you want.
I appreciate it. If you want me, I'd be more than willing.
I'd love to.
At the very least, I'll give you an update, see what weird things have happened to me since then, or something.
Yeah, but Duke and I are going to do a kind of a Bigfoot conspiracy corner show, and that's why I wanted Duke to come on tonight, to have him hear this side of it. Like I said, there was other things I wanted to get to, but I'm really glad you were here because I just sat and listened to everything. It's a lot to take in. It's a lot of information to take in and kind of.
It really is.
Everything you just said. And to know that there's several other witnesses that saw it too, because I heard bits and pieces of it, but I sure appreciate you coming on and sharing the full story.
Well,
yeah,
you're
thanks
welcome.
for having the
You're
courage for hanging out there the whole weekend and running around and actually checking out everything by yourself too.
Honestly, that's what I went down there for. That, and I wasn't doing anything wrong, and just honestly, there was just that part of me that I just that's what kept me going, and just saying, this is as much my forest as anyone else's, and by golly, I can drive through this thing. I can walk in it. I'm not doing anything illegal, or anything else.
Yeah,
and I never, after Chet, I never physically was approached or talked to by anyone or anything else. I did not have a Men in Black type thing or anything like that. I hadn't had anything like that, and I'm hoping I don't. But there was still just that was all that was necessary. Message received. And so, hey, everyone out in the world, they're actually wanting to send that message out. That's the simple matter. I mean, that's how it came across. I can't see this being anything else. I mean, just rationally, if this was anything else, it is so mind-boggling how something could have steamrolled into that. Yeah. Surely these people are more competent than that. And I go back to saying those cops that were there that day that we interacted with, they were good, normal cops. They even sat there and they were doing their jobs. They were keeping us calm. They would joke with us a little bit, things like that. While they were detaining us, they let us know we weren't the targets, and everything. But I don't think they had any idea or any clue. I think they were probably, maybe at least a couple of them were probably a little more mystified or just as mystified as us as to what was really going on. They didn't intimate that. That is my assumption, but I'm just, knowing cops in general, that's how I read them. The only thing I can think of that justified that number of cops was we had a party of like 13 people total, I think. And so if they were coming up to confront, I can understand, if you're confronting a group, especially an armed group out in the middle of the woods, you may want to have a reasonable show of force. I'm fairly certain they equaled our number of people or exceeded it. I did not do a count. I mean, I'm kicking myself in the butt because I had video. I had video. Yeah, I was about to say I had video equipment out. I had body cams that actually I took off and sat down when the cops pulled up because I didn't want them sitting there thinking, going through and frisking me and doing everything else. And it didn't even occur to me that I hadn't turned them on yet, and I didn't. When the cops came in, I just sat everything down. I took my body vest off and everything, and I put it down. And it never occurred to me to turn those damn recorders on. And that's what kills me is I wish I had gotten this on video, and I never did.
Yeah, I got pictures. I haven't posted them, but I have pictures of all the SUVs and even some of the police officers standing around. And you're right.
Okay, well then, I was about to say, then you're able to verify what I'm talking about because like I said, I'm fuzzy on the total number of cops. I'm fuzzy on the total number of SUVs, and I know there were at least 6. I wanted to say originally there were 8 to 10, but then one of the other members corrected me and swore there was only 6. And I'm thinking, I know I can remember more than 6 in my head, so I'm betting right at about 8 vehicles.
Yeah,
and everything
is there. At the photo.
Yeah, look at it and
does stand out. I remember there being more than 6 as far as SUVs go. But,
and each one of them had 2 officers in them, essentially. I think only 1 or 2 of them may have had one officer. I think our primary investigator was in his own vehicle, and I think there may have been one other guy. He didn't talk a whole lot. He was a tall, skinny guy. He just kind of stood around and observed everything. I figured he was one of the ones that were just assigned to stand back and watch everyone's reactions and everything while the other ones chit-chatted with everybody.
Well, we'll have to do a part 2 on this. And, Stephen, I'm going to definitely have you back. Duke, I'd love to have you back. And we'll have to do a part 2, guys. I didn't realize this was going to go as long as it did. I'm glad it did because I really did want to hear the full story. But thank you guys for coming on. I really do appreciate you guys being here tonight.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome, Wes.
Thanks, guys. I will be back on Sunday. Got a great ATV rider that ran into a Sasquatch. Great encounter. What's interesting about his encounter, he didn't believe in Sasquatch prior to this. And I find that fascinating when someone doesn't really buy into this and then they have an encounter. So look for that on Sunday. I will see you guys next time. Have a good night, everyone.